The florist dropped an armful of emerald orchids onto the head table. The heavy glass vase hit the polished oak with a sharp thud. I stopped in the doorway of the Grand Prairie Estate ballroom. My fingers tightened around the leather folder containing my seating charts. 3 weeks. I was getting married in exactly 3 weeks, and my carefully selected blush pink peonies were gone. A young woman with a clipboard hurried past. Lexi, the new event coordinator. She wore a forced, panicked smile. She pointed at the centerpieces, instructing the staff to clear the remaining pink arrangements. I stepped into the room. The air conditioning hummed, chilling the sweat on the back of my neck. "Those are the wrong flowers," I said. My voice stayed level. Working in corporate supply chain logistics trains you to strip emotion from a crisis. Lexi looked at her clipboard, her smile faltering. "I am sorry, but the bride requested the emerald palette change this morning." The sharp click of heels on hardwood echoed behind me. She means me. I turned. My older sister Madison stood near the dormant champagne fountain. She wore a tailored beige linen suit and held an iced Americano. The ice rattled against the plastic as she took a slow sip. 12 weeks ago, Madison had secured a diamond ring from a local real estate developer. Since then, her upcoming wedding had become a competitive sport. "Madison," I said, "what are you doing?" She waved her manicured hand toward the florist's. "Upgrading things. Blush is outdated. Emerald photographs much better. Kyle's parents expect a certain aesthetic." I looked from my sister to the young coordinator. "This is my venue date." Madison offered a tight, sympathetic smile, the kind of smile meant to look good for an audience. "I told them you decided to postpone. Kyle and I needed a prime June Saturday. His family has investors flying in. You and Liam are so low-key anyway. You can just do something smaller, a backyard thing." Welcome back to Linda Vengeance, where we explore the darkest corners of family betrayal. If you have ever been the sibling expected to step aside, this story is for you. Drop your age in the comments and let me know if you would have stayed quiet. Subscribe for more. Now, back to the ballroom. A familiar heavy pressure settled behind my ribs. For a decade, I had shrunk myself to make room for Madison. I gave up my bedroom when she moved back home. I paid her car insurance when she quit her job. Now, she was standing in my ballroom, sipping coffee, claiming my wedding day. Lexi shifted her weight, looking uncomfortable but firmly planted beside Madison. The coordinator had bought the story, dazzled by the mention of a prominent local developer. She had skipped standard operating procedure. She had not checked the master file. The urge to scream flared in my chest. Then it died. Screaming gave Madison power. Screaming made me the crazy sister ruining her aesthetic. Instead, my mind cataloged the vulnerabilities. Lexi executed a major modification to a locked event without verifying the paperwork. If she had opened the physical folder, she would have seen the non-refundable deposit. More importantly, she would have seen that Jonah Ralphie was the sole signatory on the legally binding contract. I looked at the emerald orchids. I looked at Madison's smug expression. She expected a fight. She wanted a scene she could recount to our mother over Chardonnay. I smiled, just a small, polite curve of my lips. "Enjoy the orchids," I said. I turned and walked out the double doors. The Kansas summer heat hit my face as I crossed the gravel parking lot to my sedan. I was not going to fight for the venue. I was going to hand it over right along with the impending invoice. The drive from Overland Park to Olathe takes exactly 22 minutes with afternoon traffic. I drove in total silence. The radio remained off. My hands gripped the leather steering wheel, tracing the stitching under my thumbs. Most people who just lost their $50,000 wedding venue would be crying or calling a lawyer from the highway. I did neither. I needed to see my mother. I needed to look Brenda in the eye and find out exactly how deep this betrayal went. Brenda lived in a 4-bedroom colonial at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. The lawn was perfectly manicured. The flower beds bloomed with fresh hydrangeas. I parked in the driveway and walked through the front door without knocking. The house smelled of expensive vanilla candles and roasting garlic. I found my mother in the kitchen. She stood at the granite island wearing a silk blouse, effortlessly working a corkscrew into a bottle of Chardonnay. She did not flinch when I walked in. She did not drop the bottle. She just pulled the cork with a soft pop and reached for a glass. "Madison called me," Brenda said. Her voice was light, conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. She poured the pale yellow wine and took a slow, appreciative sip. I stood across the island from her. "She called you," I repeated. Brenda sighed, setting the glass down. The condensation immediately formed a ring on the dark granite surface. "Jonah, try to understand. Kyle's family expects a grand event. They have local politicians and corporate partners attending. Madison is marrying into a different tier of society. You and Liam are so low-key. You do not even like being the center of attention. A huge estate wedding just does not suit you anyway." There it was, the gaslighting served with a side of chilled wine. She was not denying the theft. She was rephrasing it as a favor. I looked around the kitchen. I looked at the pristine subway tile backsplash. I looked at the stainless steel refrigerator. Then I looked at the floor beneath my feet. 4 years ago, I stood on this exact hardwood floor holding a notice of default from the bank. Brenda had taken out a second mortgage to fund a lifestyle she could not sustain, and the bank was 72 hours away from foreclosure. I was 24 years old. I had just started building my retirement account. I drained my savings to pay off her arrears. I paid the early withdrawal penalties. I emptied my emergency fund. Brenda hugged me, and promised to pay back every cent once she got back on her feet. 48 months had passed. She had purchased a new luxury sedan and remodeled the guest bathroom. I had not seen a single dime. I realized standing there that my role in this family was never daughter. My role was infrastructure. I was the bridge they walked across to get to what they wanted. If the bridge crumbled, that was just the cost of their journey. "Did you tell her to do it?" I asked. Brenda waved her hand, a dismissive flutter of fingers. "I simply suggested that since you had not mailed the formal invitations yet, the date was flexible." "Madison needs this, Jonah. We are family. We support each other." Support. The word tasted like ash. My goal crystallized in that kitchen. I did not want an apology. I did not want the June date back. I wanted to cut the financial umbilical cord that kept me tethered to these people. The obstacle was not Madison stealing my venue. The obstacle was their absolute certainty that I would absorb the loss and keep walking. "I will let her know my decision," I said. Brenda smiled, looking relieved. "I knew you would be reasonable. Let me pour you a glass." "I am driving," I replied. I turned and walked out the door. The latch clicked shut behind me, a sharp, final sound. My house in Leawood was 30 minutes away. It was a modest, mid-century modern build that Liam and I had renovated ourselves. We spent our weekends sanding floors and painting trim. It was quiet. It was ours. When I walked through the front door, the smell of seared chicken and rosemary drifted from the kitchen. Liam stood at the stove turning vegetables in a skillet. He wore a faded college t-shirt and slacks from his software sales job. He looked up, his face breaking into a wide, easy smile, the kind of smile that made the knot in my stomach loosen. "Hey," he said, "how was the final walkthrough with the coordinator? Did we sort out the vegetarian plating?" I set my purse on the entryway table. I walked over to the kitchen island and sat on a stool. I watched him cook for a long moment, anchoring myself to the reality of the good man standing in front of me. "Madison stole the venue," I said. Liam stopped. The wooden spoon hovered over the skillet. He looked at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. He turned off the burner. "What do you mean she stole it?" I explained everything. I told him about the emerald orchids, the new coordinator, the beige linen suit, and the conversation with Brenda. I watched Liam's posture change. Liam was a closer. He negotiated complex enterprise software deals for a living. He understood contracts, leverage, and bad faith actors. His jaw tightened. The easy smile vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. He picked up his phone from the counter. "I am calling Greg," Liam said. Greg was a college friend who practiced corporate litigation downtown. We are filing an injunction tomorrow morning. We are going to lock that venue down so nobody gets to use it. I will drag your sister into deposition." I shook my head. Liam put the phone down. "Jonah, my parents already booked their flights from Boston," he said, his voice rising, carrying a rare edge of anger. "First-class, non-refundable tickets. My sister took time off work and arranged childcare. My grandparents are shipping gifts. We are 3 weeks out. Your family cannot just hijack our venue and expect us to set up folding chairs in a backyard." I stood up and walked around the counter. I placed my hand over his. His knuckles were white. The heat radiating from his skin matched the quiet fury in his eyes. He wanted to protect me. He wanted to go to war because he loved me. "I know," I said softly, "and we are not doing a backyard wedding, but we are not hiring Greg either." Liam looked at me, searching my face. "Why not?" "They breached contract. Because if we sue them, we just get our deposit back and a lot of legal fees," I explained. My voice was steady, the supply chain director taking over. "If we fight them, we are validating their game. We are playing by their rules. Brenda and Madison expect a screaming match. They expect a dramatic family feud." "What do you want to do?" Liam asked. His thumb brushed over the back of my hand. I pulled the leather seating chart portfolio toward me. I opened it and extracted the venue master contract. I flipped to page 4, tapping a specific paragraph with my index finger. "I want to give it to her," I said. Liam stared at me like I had lost my mind. "You want to surrender?" "Not surrender. Transfer." I pointed to the clause. "The venue requires $50,000 total. I paid the $15,000 deposit 12 months ago. Madison hijacked the date, but she did not change the billing profile because the coordinator did not verify the financial portal. In exactly 48 hours, the remaining $35,000 will automatically draft from my checking account to cover the catering, the bar, and the space rental." Liam's eyes widened as the implications began to form. "Madison lied to Kyle's family," I continued. "She told them she secured the venue. I am willing to bet she let them assume she paid for it. She has no liquid cash, Liam. She works part-time and maxes out her credit cards. She thinks she trapped me into paying for her luxury aesthetic because she thinks I am too afraid to pull the plug." A slow, dangerous realization crept across Liam's face. He looked at the contract, then back up at me. "You are going to pull the funding," he said. The anger in his voice shifted into something much sharper. "I am going to do more than that," I replied. "I am going to legally transfer the debt to her name and step out of the way. I promise you, Liam, we will not have a screaming match. We will have financial liberation. When the dust settles, my family will never ask me for another dime as long as they live." Liam set his phone down on the counter. He looked at the paperwork, the gears in his own head turning, aligning with my strategy. The vegetables in the skillet had gone cold, but neither of us noticed. The logistics were terrifying, but the clarity was absolute. We were no longer planning a wedding. We were architecting a collapse. Monday morning arrived with a pale, overcast sky, the kind of flat Kansas morning that bleached the color out of the landscape. I dressed in my charcoal gray suit, the one I wore for quarterly vendor audits. I did not bother with makeup. I bypassed the main estate gates and drove directly to the administrative annex, a sleek, modern glass building tucked behind the historic limestone mansion. This was where the actual business of the Grand Prairie estate happened, the place where romance translated into revenue. I pushed through the heavy glass doors. The lobby smelled of lavender and expensive floor wax. Lexi, the young coordinator from Saturday, sat at the front reception desk. She wore a headset and typed furiously on a sleek laptop. When she saw me, her fingers froze over the keyboard. Her eyes darted to the locked frosted glass door behind her. "Ms. Ralphie," she started. Her voice wavered. "I thought we were clear on Saturday. The bride has already confirmed the new schedule." I did not stop walking. I did not acknowledge her statement. I just maintained my stride, forcing her to stand up and scramble out from behind the desk. "I am not here to see you, Lexi," I said. "I am here to see Marcus Vance." Marcus was the general manager. I had spent 3 weeks negotiating the original deposit with him 12 months ago. He was a shrewd operator who cared about profit margins and risk mitigation. He did not care about emerald orchids or seeding charts. "You cannot just go back there," Lexi protested, trailing behind me. "He is on a conference call." I reached the frosted glass door, gripped the brushed steel handle, and pushed it open. Marcus sat behind a sprawling mahogany desk. He held a silver pen, reviewing a stack of invoices. He looked up, annoyed by the intrusion. Then he recognized me. The annoyance morphed into cautious calculation. He gestured for Lexi to leave. She closed the door, sealing us in a quiet room insulated by thick acoustic paneling. "Jonah," he said, keeping his tone carefully neutral, "have a seat. What can I do for you this morning?" I did not sit. I unclasped my leather portfolio and pulled out the original master agreement. I laid it flat on the center of his desk. I smoothed the crease with my palm. "You breached contract, Marcus," I said. My tone remained flat, stripped of anger, stripped of threat, just a statement of fact. He glanced down at the document. "We are accommodating a family scheduling change. Your sister informed our staff that you postponed. We are simply keeping the reservation within the Ralphie family. We consider it a courtesy." "Courtesy is not a legal defense," I replied. I tapped the signature line. Section 4, paragraph 2. Any modification to the date, scope, or aesthetic of the event requires the written consent of the primary signatory. I am the primary signatory. Your staff altered the floral arrangements, modified the timeline, and accepted verbal instructions from an unauthorized third party. You did not verify the financial profile. You allowed a stranger to hijack a $50,000 asset. Marcus shifted in his high-backed leather chair. The silver pen slipped from his fingers, clattering softly against the mahogany. The corporate bravado began to crack. He knew the liability laws. He knew the financial exposure his company now faced. "If you want the date back, we can certainly revert the changes," he offered. His voice lost its smooth, practiced edge. "We will comp the floral adjustments. I do not want the date back." I stared at him, watching the faint sheen of sweat form on his forehead. "I am prepared to file a negligence lawsuit by 5 o'clock today. I will tie up this venue in litigation for the next 3 years. I will subpoena your communications. I will ensure every engaged couple in the tri-state area knows your administrative staff hands over locked reservations to anyone who walks in and claims to be the bride." Silence stretched across the room. The hum of the central air conditioning felt deafening. Marcus swallowed hard. He folded his hands, adopting a posture of surrender. "What do you want, Jonah?" "I want to release you from liability," I said. "I want you to draft a formal addendum, right now. The document will explicitly state that I am transferring the reservation, the date, and all associated liabilities to Madison Ralphie. It will state that the venue accepts her as the sole client. Most importantly, it will include a clause legally revoking my credit card authorization for the remaining $35,000 balance." He blinked, processing the elegant simplicity of the trap. He realized I was not trying to punish his company. I was using his company to punish my sister. "If she signs it, the debt becomes hers," Marcus murmured, more to himself than to me. "She does not need to sign it yet," I corrected. "You just need to accept the transfer of the primary contract. You will send her the electronic signature link for the final invoice. Once you countersign my release, I walk away. You keep the $15,000 deposit I already paid. That covers your immediate overhead. The remaining balance rests solely on Madison's shoulders." Marcus turned to his computer monitor. The rhythmic clack of his keyboard filled the acoustic silence. He was a pragmatist. I was offering him a clean exit from a messy legal disaster. Within 10 minutes, his printer whirred to life. He handed me a crisp, warm sheet of paper. I read every word. The legal phrasing was airtight. Jonah Ralphie formally relinquishes the date. Madison Ralphie assumes all financial obligations. Payment methods belonging to Jonah Ralphie are hereby expunged from the Grand Prairie Estate billing portal. I clicked my pen and signed my name. The ink bled slightly into the heavy stock paper. I handed it back to him. "Remove my card from your system," I instructed. He clicked his mouse 3 times. Done. I turned and walked out of his office. I did not look at Lexi on my way out. The morning air felt different as I walked back to my car, lighter. The invisible weight of the impending wedding had vanished, replaced by the cold, sharp thrill of strategic execution. That evening, I sat on the couch in my living room. Liam was working late, closing a software deal with a client on the West Coast. The house was quiet, save for the soft ticking of the wall clock. I opened my laptop and logged into my banking portal. I watched the pending transactions. Everything was still. My savings account remained intact. My checking account showed a comfortable buffer. I picked up my phone. The screen illuminated the dark room. I opened the application holding our family group chat. The thread was titled The Wedding Planners. It included Brenda, Madison, myself, and 2 aunts who lived in Topeka. For the past 48 hours, the chat had been dormant, a tense, waiting silence. They were waiting for the fallout. They were waiting for me to call crying or for me to demand an explanation. They expected the predictable cycle of my outrage, followed by my eventual submission. Growing up, silence was the weapon Brenda used best. If I asked for a new pair of track shoes for school, she would sigh, reference the tight household budget, and then stop speaking to me for 2 days. The quiet isolation always broke my resolve. I would end up apologizing for needing things. I learned to anticipate their needs to avoid the punishing quiet. Tonight, I weaponized their expectations against them. I typed a single text message. "Do not worry about the venue mix-up. I will take care of the final invoices. Enjoy the June date." I pressed send. I set the phone face down on the coffee table. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of iced water. By the time I returned, the screen was glowing with rapid-fire notifications. Brenda replied first. "Oh, sweetheart, I knew you would understand. Family always figures it out. Love you." Madison replied 30 seconds later. "Thanks, sis. You are a lifesaver. Kyle's mom is going to be so thrilled with the emerald aesthetic. We should get brunch next week to celebrate." My aunts chimed in with red heart emojis and comments about my generosity. I read the messages sipping the cold water. The ice clinked against the glass. They interpreted the text exactly as I intended. To them, taking care of the invoices meant opening my wallet. It meant quietly paying the $35,000 to keep the peace, just like I had paid for the foreclosure, the car insurance, the countless other emergencies generated by their reckless choices. They saw a red herring. They swallowed the bait whole. In reality, taking care of them meant I had permanently locked the cage doors. The American billing system operates on rigid, automated logic. It does not care about family ties. It does not care about emerald orchids or local real estate developers. It only cares about the name on the account and the availability of funds. I had removed the funds. The venue now held a legally binding document transferring the debt to a woman who worked part-time at a boutique. I placed my phone on the charger. The trap was fully set. But a lingering question gnawed at the edge of my mind. Why was Madison so desperate for this specific date and this specific venue? Kyle's family was wealthy, yes, but something about her rush felt frantic, almost panicked. I opened my laptop again. If Madison had hijacked the venue, she likely hijacked the other vendors too. The caterer, the brass band, the florist. I needed to access their portals to sever my liability there as well. I clicked the bookmark for the catering company. The login page loaded. I entered my credentials. The dashboard appeared, displaying the menu options and the communication log. I scrolled down to review the recent messages, intending to draft a cancellation notice. My eyes caught a strange email thread forwarded by the catering manager, an exchange between Madison and Kyle's father. I leaned closer to the screen. The laptop glow cast long shadows against the living room wall. I started reading the messages. The deeper I read, the colder my hands became. Madison was not just stealing a wedding date. She was constructing a staggering financial illusion, and the sheer scale of her deception was about to drag her future husband down with her. The living room remained cloaked in shadows, illuminated only by the cool blue light radiating from my laptop screen. The house was quiet. Liam had finished his conference call and gone to bed, his steady breathing echoing faintly down the hallway. I sat at the kitchen island with a fresh glass of iced water. The condensation gathered on the smooth glass, dripping slowly onto the granite counter. It was time to sever the remaining financial arteries. Madison had claimed the venue, but a wedding of that scale required an entire ecosystem of vendors. A 10-piece brass band, a high-end floral designer, a premium catering company. I had spent months meticulously vetting each of these businesses, negotiating terms and securing the deposits. Now I needed to systematically audit every portal and remove my payment authorizations before the final balances became due. I started with Blue Stem Culinary. They were the most expensive line item after the estate itself. I typed my credentials into their client dashboard. The interface loaded, displaying a progress wheel that spun for a few seconds before revealing the event details. My eyes immediately scanned the menu summary. The figures had changed. During my last review, the catering estimate stood at $18,000, covering a refined but sensible herb-roasted chicken and salmon dinner. The new total glared from the top right corner of the screen: $32,000. I scrolled down to review the modifications. The chicken was gone. In its place sat a Wagyu beef carving station, butter-poached lobster tails, and a towering artisanal caviar display. Madison was spending money she did not possess. I knew my sister's financial reality intimately. Madison worked 22 hours a week at a boutique in the Crossroads Arts District. She spent her days folding cashmere sweaters and her evenings maintaining an elaborate social media presence. Her luxury car lease consumed most of her paycheck. Her closet overflowed with designer shoes and handbags, all financed through high-interest credit lines that hovered dangerously close to their limits. I knew this because for years I had intercepted the brightly colored collection notices mailed to our mother's house, quietly paying the minimums to keep the debt collectors at bay. I clicked on the communication log to find the authorization for these extravagant menu upgrades. The catering manager, a precise woman named Sarah, had politely requested proof of funds for the sudden $14,000 expansion. Madison, acting with her usual reckless arrogance, had replied earlier that afternoon to demonstrate her financial solvency. She intended to send a simple bank snapshot. Instead, in her haste to secure the Wagyu beef, she had forwarded an entire, unedited email thread directly from her phone. I opened the attachment. The original sender was Richard Sterling. He was Kyle's father. The signature block identified him as a senior partner at a prominent corporate law firm in Kansas City. The subject line read, "Prenuptial Agreement, Revisions, and Asset Disclosure." The legal jargon was dense, but years of managing corporate supply chain contracts allowed me to translate it effortlessly. Richard Sterling was playing absolute hardball. He was protecting his son's substantial trust fund and future commercial real estate holdings. He outlined a strict baseline for the marriage. He flatly refused to include a spousal support escalator without an equal financial contribution from the bride. He demanded a comprehensive, documented disclosure of Madison's independent assets before he would allow his son to sign the marriage license. I scrolled down to read Madison's reply to the attorney. The lie sat there on the screen, glaring in plain black text. Richard Madison wrote, "My liquid assets are more than sufficient to meet the matching requirement outlined in Section 4. I have already paid the $50,000 Grand Prairie estate deposit entirely in cash from my personal reserves. The venue is secured solely under my name. I will forward the final zero balance receipt next week to your office as proof of funds." I stopped breathing for a fraction of a second. The cold glass of water slipped slightly in my grip. I set it down on the counter. The puzzle pieces snapped together, forming a horrifying picture of calculated deception. Madison did not steal the wedding date just because she liked the emerald orchids. She did not hijack the venue simply to outshine her younger sister. She hijacked the venue to manufacture a $50,000 asset out of thin air. By taking over the reservation, Madison created a documented paper trail. She planned to use the venue invoice, which showed the $15,000 deposit I had already paid, as proof of her own accumulated wealth. She was banking on my lifelong habit of silent compliance. She assumed I would absorb the remaining $35,000 to avoid a family screaming match. That would allow her to present a paid-in-full $50,000 receipt to a ruthless corporate lawyer. She was using my bank account to secure a lucrative divorce payout clause before she even walked down the aisle. The stakes instantly transformed. This was no longer a petty sibling rivalry over a Saturday in June. This was premeditated financial fraud. Madison was orchestrating a massive deception against a family that employed teams of litigators for a living. If Richard Sterling discovered the truth, he would not just cancel the wedding. He would destroy her social standing, ruin her credit, and potentially pursue legal action for fraudulent misrepresentation. My hands moved across the trackpad. The sister who used to pay for Madison's car insurance vanished. The supply chain director took over. In my industry, when a vendor attempts to falsify a shipping manifest, you do not call them to argue. You do not demand an apology. You secure the documentation. You build an impenetrable wall of evidence. I clicked the print icon. I saved the entire email chain as a portable document format file. I downloaded the menu modifications. I downloaded the timestamps. I captured every lie, every boast, and every piece of fraudulent leverage Madison had carelessly submitted to the caterer. I opened a new folder on my encrypted hard drive. I named it the Sterling Audit. I dragged the files into the folder. A satisfying digital click sounded through the laptop speakers. I possessed the exact ammunition required to level Madison's entire future. I closed the catering portal and moved to the brass band interface. I navigated to the billing section, deleted my credit card information, and drafted a formal cancellation notice. I repeated the process for the high-end floral designer. One by one, I severed my name from every single contract. I left no trace of my financial presence. The invisible safety net that Madison had relied upon for her entire adult life was now completely dismantled. She was standing alone on a very fragile glass floor, holding a $32,000 catering bill she had no way to pay, and a prenuptial agreement built on a verifiable lie. I closed the laptop. The screen went black, reflecting my own calm expression in the dark kitchen. I stood up and walked to the living room window. Beyond the glass, the Kansas skyline glowed with distant city lights. The highway hummed with nighttime traffic, a steady rhythm of people moving forward. The trap was no longer just a billing error. It was a legal snare armed with absolute truth. Madison believed she was outsmarting everyone. She believed she had secured her wealthy future by stepping on my shoulders. But she had failed to realize that the person holding her up could simply step out of the way. I turned away from the window. The house was quiet, peaceful, and entirely mine. In exactly 8 hours, the vendors would open their morning emails. The automated billing systems would begin their scheduled drafts. The illusion would meet the reality of the American banking system, and the first domino would finally fall. The blue light from the monitor cast a pale glow across the kitchen island. 2 a.m. The house rested in total silence. I opened a new browser window and logged into my secure email client. The time for gathering evidence had passed. The operational phase was ready to begin. In global supply chain management, there is a term called structural liquidation. You use it when a primary contractor defaults or acts in bad faith. You do not argue with them. You do not appeal to their better nature. You simply cut the supply lines, reroute the inventory, and let the market deal with the breach. Emotion is a liability. Efficiency is the only metric that matters. Tonight, I was liquidating my own wedding. I opened a blank message. I needed a template, something airtight, professional, and devoid of any familial sentiment. I typed the subject line, Notice of Cancellation and Transfer of Liability. I addressed the first email to Blue Stem Culinary. Effective immediately, I am canceling my services for the June reservation. I have executed a formal liability transfer with the Grand Prairie Estate. Madison Ralphie assumes the date and all associated vendor coordination. Please update your billing portal to reflect her contact information. Direct all final balance inquiries and menu approvals to her directly. I am no longer the primary contact for this event. I attached the portable document format file Marcus had generated at the venue, the countersigned release form, the digital proof that I possessed zero legal attachment to the property. I pressed send. The email vanished from my outbox. One supply line cut. I copied the text and pasted it into a new message window. I addressed this one to the Brass Band Management Company. I attached the venue release. Send. Another line severed. I repeated the process for the floral designer. The high-end rental company providing the upgraded Chiavari chairs. The specialized lighting contractor. I moved through the list with the mechanical precision of an auditor. Next came the payment gateways. Sending the emails established the legal boundary, but the American billing system relies on automated software. Software does not read emails until a human opens them at 9 in the morning. Software just runs the numbers on file when the clock strikes midnight on the due date. I navigated back to the catering portal. I accessed the Payment Methods tab. My Platinum Rewards card sat there, the default instrument for the remaining $32,000 balance. I clicked the small trash can icon next to the expiration date. A prompt appeared, warning me that removing the card would result in a failed draft if no backup method was provided. I clicked confirm. The card vanished. I did the same for the band, the florist, the lighting company. I scoured every digital footprint I had left in the wedding infrastructure. By 2:30 in the morning, the financial safety net Madison did not even know she relied upon was gone. I had erased myself from the equation. A soft footstep sounded on the hardwood floor behind me. I turned my head. Liam stood in the hallway entrance. He wore gray sweatpants and a plain white shirt. His hair was slightly sleep-rumpled, but his eyes were sharp and awake. He held 2 crystal wine glasses in his left hand. In his right hand, he carried a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon. "We bought that bottle in Napa Valley last year," I said quietly. "We were saving it for St. Lucia." Liam walked into the kitchen and set the glasses on the granite counter. He produced a corkscrew from the drawer. "We are still going to St. Lucia," he replied, "but I think tonight qualifies as a special occasion. You just successfully dismantled a hostile corporate takeover before breakfast." He peeled the foil and twisted the corkscrew. The cork slid free with a satisfying, hollow sound. He poured the dark red wine, pushing a glass across the island toward me. I closed the laptop and picked up the glass. The wine smelled of dark cherries and oak. I took a slow sip. The warmth spread down my throat, settling the lingering adrenaline in my chest. "Is it done?" Liam asked. He leaned against the counter, watching me closely. "It is done," I answered. "The vendors have their legal notices. My credit cards are purged from the automated drafting systems. The venue possesses the signed transfer addendum. Madison is standing alone on the stage she stole." Liam nodded, taking a drink. He set his glass down and crossed his arms. "When does the bill come due?" "The catering balance hits the 14-day deadline on Thursday," I said. "The band and the florist auto-draft by Friday afternoon. The venue will likely process their final invoice by the end of the week." He checked the digital clock on the oven display. It read 2:45. Thursday is exactly 48 hours away. What happens when they try to charge her? "They will not try to charge her first," I explained. "The software will attempt to run the primary card on file, but there is no card on file anymore. The system will trigger a hard failure. The accounting software will generate an automated alert and flag the account as delinquent. At that point, the vendor accounting departments will open their emails. They will read my transfer notice. They will look at the venue release document. And then they will pick up the phone and call the new bride." A quiet laugh escaped Liam's lips. It lacked humor. It was a sound of disbelief mixed with grim anticipation. "She is going to wake up to $30,000 in failed payment notices," he murmured. "Closer to 40, I corrected. "She upgraded the menu to Wagyu beef and lobster." Liam's eyebrows raised. He shook his head slowly. Your sister really thought she could just put all that on your tab. She actually believed you would just swallow a $40,000 invoice so she could impress a rich lawyer. She believed it because I trained her to believe it. I said the truth tasting bitter, even accompanied by expensive wine. My whole life, my mother demanded I keep the peace. Keeping the peace always cost money. I paid the utility bills when Brenda overspent. I covered Madison's deductibles when she crashed her cars. I never fought back because fighting back meant dealing with their endless, punishing silence. I taught them that my boundaries were negotiable if they pushed hard enough. Liam reached across the island and covered my hand with his. His palm was warm, solid. You are not that person anymore, Jonah. I looked down at our joined hands. No, I am not. We stood there in the quiet kitchen finishing the wine. The transition felt monumental. For months, wedding planning had been a proactive, exhausting endeavor. Choosing linens, tasting cake, managing guest lists, absorbing my mother's passive-aggressive critiques about my minimalist taste. Now, the proactive phase was over. The trap was set, the tension shifted. It morphed from the stress of building something into the agonizing anticipation of waiting for it to break. I took my empty glass to the sink and rinsed it under the faucet. The sound of running water seemed unusually loud in the stillness of the house. I looked out the window above the sink. The neighborhood remained dark asleep under the heavy Kansas night. Somewhere across the city, Madison was likely sleeping in her boutique apartment. She was dreaming of emerald orchids and caviar. She was dreaming of the bulletproof prenuptial agreement she thought she had secured with my money. She had no idea the floor beneath her bed had just vanished. Liam walked up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. He rested his chin on my shoulder. You need to sleep, he whispered. Tomorrow is a regular work day. You are right, I agreed. I leaned back into his embrace for a moment, drawing strength from his steady presence. I dried my hands on a towel and followed him down the hallway toward our bedroom. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Sleep remained elusive. My mind raced, calculating the precise timeline of the impending collapse. The vendors operated on strict net 14 payment terms. In the wedding industry, failure to secure funds 2 weeks before the event means the trucks do not load, the flowers do not ship, the chefs do not order the perishable inventory. The margins are too tight to gamble on a promise. The first system to trigger would be the floral designer. They were a boutique operation highly dependent on cash flow to secure fresh blooms from international wholesalers. Their automated gateway ran its batches early in the morning. I rolled onto my side, watching the red numbers on the digital alarm clock tick forward. 3:15, 3:30, 4 o'clock. The countdown had begun. The digital infrastructure I had left behind was a series of tripwires. I had removed the safety net, locked the exit doors, and handed Madison the keys to a sinking ship. In less than 6 hours, the sun would rise over Kansas City. The business day would commence. The servers hosting the vendor billing platforms would execute their scheduled tasks. They would search for a valid credit card. They would find empty digital folders. And then the phone calls would begin. I closed my eyes, waiting for the morning. I knew exactly whose phone was going to ring first. The valet at the Mission Hills Country Club took my keys with a practiced nod. I stepped out of my sedan into the humid Kansas City afternoon. 2 weeks remained until the scheduled wedding date. Brenda had orchestrated a lavish bridal luncheon for Madison, utilizing the country club membership of one of Kyle's wealthy aunts. I smoothed the fabric of my navy blue dress and walked up the wide stone steps. I entered the private dining suite on the second floor. The room smelled of fresh-cut lilies and roasted pecans. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of the manicured 18-hole golf course. 50 women milled around linen-draped tables holding crystal champagne flutes. They wore pastel dresses and wide-brimmed hats, a sea of carefully curated wealth. Brenda spotted me near the entrance. She navigated through the crowd, her face painted with a bright, welcoming smile designed for public consumption. She wore a tailored peach suit that looked brand new. I wondered briefly which credit card she had maxed out to buy it. "Jonah, darling, you made it," Brenda said. She leaned in and pressed a dry cheek against mine. She did not actually hug me. It was a gesture meant to be photographed, not felt. I would not miss it, I replied. Brenda patted my arm. Go get a drink. Mingle. Kyle's mother is here, so please be on your best behavior. We want today to be perfect for your sister. I walked over to the beverage station. A bartender in a crisp white shirt offered me a mimosa. I asked for sparkling water with a twist of lime. I took my glass and retreated to a quiet corner near the windows. The cool condensation on the glass felt grounding against my palm. I watched the room. The scene unfolding before me dripped with a thick, intoxicating irony. Madison held court in the center of the suite. She wore a stunning white silk dress that draped elegantly over her frame. She laughed loudly, tossing her hair over her shoulder. She looked every inch the wealthy, carefree bride. She stood next to Mrs. Sterling, Kyle's mother. Mrs. Sterling was a formidable woman with sharp features and a posture forged by decades of country club politics. I took a slow sip of my water and listened. The acoustics of the room allowed their conversation to drift over the gentle hum of background music. The planning has just been so seamless, Madison projected, ensuring her voice carried to the surrounding guests. We finalized the catering menu yesterday. Kyle and I decided the herb-roasted chicken was just a bit too ordinary for our tastes. We upgraded to the Wagyu beef carving station and butter-poached lobster tails. Mrs. Sterling nodded approvingly. That sounds wonderful, Madison. Richard and I were just discussing the catering costs. If you need any assistance covering the difference Kyle mentioned, we could contribute. Oh, no, please do not worry about that, Madison laughed, a bright, rehearsed sound. I already took care of it. I prefer to handle my own investments. I paid the venue deposit and the catering upgrades entirely in cash from my personal accounts. I wanted to treat Kyle to the perfect day. I stood in my corner, my face perfectly still. The lie floated in the air, bold and glittering. Madison paraded around the room, acting like a queen holding court. She had no idea the throne she sat upon was built on a crumbling foundation. The audience in the room admired her wealth and independence. I was the only person in the building who knew the truth. I knew that Madison possessed exactly $300 in her checking account. I knew that she had lied to Kyle's father about her assets to manipulate a prenuptial agreement. And I knew that less than 72 hours ago, I had legally revoked every credit card authorization holding her illusion together. Watching her brag was like watching a woman admire her reflection in a mirror that was about to shatter. The suspension of reality felt almost cinematic. Every compliment she accepted, every boast she made, only deepened the grave she was currently digging. A waiter circulated the room with silver trays of crab cakes and bruschetta. Madison took a crab cake, smiled for a photo with a bridesmaid, and continued her performance. She caught my eye for a brief second. Her smile tightened, a flash of territorial warning before she turned her back to me. She thought I was standing in the corner out of defeat. She thought my silence was the quiet resentment of a conquered younger sister. Brenda drifted back over to my corner. She carried a fresh glass of champagne. She stood beside me looking out at Madison with an expression of profound pride. She looks beautiful, does she not? Brenda murmured. She looks very confident, I agreed. Brenda turned to me, her tone shifting into something lower and far more condescending. I want to thank you, Jonah. For what? For being an adult about all this. Brenda took a delicate sip of her drink. I know the venue mix-up was disappointing for you, but look at her. Look at this room. This is the life Madison was meant for. You stepping back and taking care of the invoices behind the scenes without causing a dramatic family scene proves you are finally maturing. You are putting family first. I am proud of you. The sheer weight of her delusion pressed against me. My mother sincerely believed I had absorbed a $40,000 financial blow simply to earn her rare praise. She interpreted my lack of screaming as submission. She mistook my calm demeanor for obedience. Growing up, I had always craved that validation. I would have scrubbed floors and emptied my bank accounts just to hear Brenda say she was proud of me. But standing in the country club, listening to her praise my manufactured submission, I felt nothing but a cold, clinical detachment. You are welcome, Mom, I said smoothly. I am just making sure everyone gets exactly what they deserve. Brenda smiled, missing the subtext entirely. Exactly. Now come sit down. They are about to serve the main luncheon course." I followed her to a table near the back. The staff began serving plates of seared scallops and asparagus. I sat quietly eating my meal, measuring the passage of time. I did not need to check my watch. My internal clock was synchronized with the automated billing software at the Grand Prairie Estate. It was currently 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The venue accounting system operated on a rigid batch processing schedule. Every weekday afternoon, the software compiled the outstanding final balances for events occurring within the 14-day window. It generated the electronic invoices and transmitted the charge requests to the Merchant Services Gateway. That transmission happened precisely at 4 o'clock. 3 hours remained. The luncheon progressed into the toast phase. Aunts and bridesmaids stood up tapping their glasses with silver spoons. They delivered tearful speeches about Madison's kind heart and her perfect match with Kyle. They spoke about the beautiful future she was building. They raised their glasses to the upcoming June wedding, wishing the couple endless prosperity. I raised my glass of sparkling water along with them. I drank to her prosperity. I drank to the impending automated draft. Dessert arrived, a towering lemon chiffon cake decorated with spun sugar. Madison cut the cake with a silver knife, posing for a dozen smartphone cameras. The room erupted in applause. The executioner's axe was swinging down from the highest point of its arc, and the victim was busy admiring the sharpness of the blade. By 3:30, the luncheon began to wind down. Guests collected their expensive gift bags and drifted toward the valet station. Madison hugged Mrs. Sterling near the doorway, kissing her cheek and promising to send the final seating arrangements by the end of the week. I walked toward the exit, my leather purse slung over my shoulder. Madison intercepted me near the coat check. "Thanks for coming, Jonah," she said. Her tone was magnanimous, the victor addressing the vanquished. "I know it must be hard for you to be here today, but the food was incredible, right?" "The food was very good," I replied. "Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, Madison." I stepped out through the heavy glass doors into the humid Kansas heat. The valet brought my sedan around. I tipped him, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The dashboard clock read 3:45. I pulled out of the country club driveway and merged onto the highway heading south toward Leawood. The traffic moved steadily. I drove in the middle lane, keeping my speed exact. I turned the radio off. The quiet cabin of my car felt like a sanctuary. The digital numbers on my dashboard clicked forward. 350, 355. My phone sat in the cup holder. It remained dark and silent. 358, 359. I exited the highway, slowing down as I approached my neighborhood. The sun beat down on the pavement. The world looked entirely normal. People walked their dogs. Delivery trucks turned corners. The clock struck 4. Somewhere across the city, a server in the Grand Prairie Estate Administrative Office initiated a command. The software reached into its digital vault, searching for the platinum credit card belonging to Jonah Ralphie. It found a void. The software pivoted, searching for an alternative payment method for the $35,000 final venue balance. It found nothing. The system flagged the account. The gateway generated a hard failure code. The automated infrastructure I had painstakingly dismantled finally collapsed. I pulled into my driveway and shifted the car into park. I did not get out immediately. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the dark screen of my phone, resting in the cup holder. The trap had sprung. The initial failure was now logged in the venue accounting system. It would take a few hours for the administrative staff to process the error report and trace the new contact information I had provided. The silence in the car felt heavy with anticipation. I knew that by tomorrow morning, the first domino would strike the second. The floral designer would run their batch. The caterer would seek their Wagyu beef funding. The illusion was over. Now, the panic would begin. I turned off the ignition and stepped out of the sedan. The late afternoon heat pressed down on my shoulders as I walked up the concrete driveway to my front door. The neighborhood was quiet, insulated by mature oak trees and deep green lawns. I unlocked the deadbolt and stepped inside. The cool, conditioned air washed over my skin, instantly soothing the residual tension from the bridal luncheon. I placed my keys in the ceramic bowl on the entryway table and slipped off my heels. The physical relief of standing on the cool hardwood floor mirrored the psychological relief expanding in my chest. The digital clock on the kitchen microwave read 4:12. The business day was drawing to a close. Behind the scenes, the automated gateways at the various vendor headquarters were executing their programmed end-of-day tasks. Data packets were moving through merchant servers, searching for routing numbers and available credit limits. My phone rested on the granite kitchen island. The screen remained dark. I poured myself a glass of cold water and leaned against the counter. I thought about a summer 5 years ago. Madison had decided she needed a spiritual reset and booked a luxury yoga retreat to Tulum. She funded the vacation using her rent money and maxed out a high-interest credit card for the flights. When a brightly colored eviction notice arrived on her apartment door, Brenda had called me in tears. She pleaded for a rescue, claiming Madison was too fragile to handle housing insecurity. I drained my checking account to keep my sister from living on the street. Madison returned from Mexico with a golden tan and zero remorse. She never understood the mechanics of consequence because I had always functioned as her designated shock absorber. At 4:15, a soft vibration rattled against the stone surface of the island. The caller identification displayed the name of the boutique floral design studio. I watched the screen pulse for a moment before answering. "Hello? Jonah, I am so sorry to interrupt your afternoon," the floral designer said. Her name was Elise. Her voice sounded tight, strung with the unique stress of a small business owner facing a cash flow crisis. "Our accounting software just flagged a hard decline on your final payment for the wedding flowers. The remaining balance is $6,000. I need to wire the funds to my international wholesaler in Holland by 5 o'clock today to secure the emerald orchids. Did your bank issue a fraud alert on the transaction?" I kept my tone serene. "There is no fraud alert, Elise. I am no longer the bride for the June date. My sister Madison Ralphie has assumed the reservation. You will need to contact her directly to establish a new payment profile for the orchids." Elise stammered, clearly thrown by the sudden administrative pivot. "But the contract is in your name." "The venue executed a formal liability transfer this morning," I explained calmly. Madison claimed the date. She requested the aesthetic changes. She is now responsible for the production costs. I recited Madison's cell phone number from memory. Elise copied it down, her tone shifting from apologetic to frantic. "Thank you, Jonah. I will call her right now." The line went dead. I set the device back on the granite counter. The first wire had been tripped. The system was functioning exactly as designed. 10 minutes passed. I drank my water slowly. The silence in my house felt earned. It was the quiet of a fortress built on boundaries. I did not feel guilty. I did not feel anxious. I felt a profound, cold clarity. At 4:27, the phone vibrated again. The screen lit up with Madison's name. I did not reach for it. I stood at the island and watched the device dance across the stone. The call rolled to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. I crossed my arms. The psychological pressure of an unanswered phone is a powerful tool. It amplifies panic. It forces the caller to confront their own isolation. I let it ring a third time. On the fourth attempt, I swiped the green icon and brought the speaker to my ear. "Hello? What is going on?" Madison demanded. Her voice echoed off hard, tiled walls. She was hiding in the country club restroom. "The florist just called me. Elise said your card declined and she needs a new authorization for $6,000 immediately. You need to call your bank and fix this right now." I maintained the precise, detached tone of a corporate auditor. "There is nothing to fix with my bank, Madison." I removed my payment methods from the vendor portals. A thick, suffocating silence stretched across the cellular connection. I could hear the faint sound of a faucet running in the background. "You removed them?" she repeated. The words lacked comprehension. "Why would you do that?" "Because it is your wedding. You requested the prime June Saturday. You changed the floral palette. The primary signatory on the reservation is responsible for the associated vendor contracts. I formally transferred the liability to you." "Are you out of your mind?" Madison shrieked. The polished, carefree persona she had displayed at the luncheon disintegrated entirely. "I do not have $6,000 for flowers. Mom said you were taking care of the invoices. You sent a text message to the family group chat saying you handled it." "I did handle it," I replied. My voice dropped to a cool, factual register. "I handled it by executing a legal release form with the estate manager. I transferred the debt to your name. You wanted the stage, you took the venue. Now you have to pay the admission price." "You cannot do this to me," she cried. The anger evaporated, replaced by raw, unfiltered terror. "Kyle's mother is right outside the bathroom door. She is waiting for me in the lobby. If Elise cancels the floral order, the ballroom will be empty. The centerpieces will be gone. Mrs. Sterling will know something is wrong. You need to put your card back on file. I will pay you back after the honeymoon, I promise." "We both know that is a lie," I said softly. "I am not your buffer anymore. You have less than 20 minutes to find a valid credit card for the floral designer. I suggest you look in your own purse." "Jonah, please," Madison begged. Her breath hitched in her throat. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I could hear her pleading my name through the tiny speaker. I pressed the red button to terminate the call. I set the phone face down on the counter. Liam walked into the kitchen. He had been working in his home office down the hall. He looked at me, taking in my calm posture. "Was that her?" he asked. I nodded. The florist ran her batch. Liam leaned against the stainless steel refrigerator. "How did she take it?" I looked at the dark screen of my phone. "She is currently hiding in a bathroom trying to figure out how to pay for the orchids." Liam did not smile. He just exhaled a long breath, crossing his arms. "It is hard to watch them hit the wall, even when they deserve it," he noted. "It is necessary," I replied. Miles away, inside the opulent country club restroom, the air smelled of expensive lavender hand soap and panic. Madison leaned heavily against the marble vanity. The cold stone seeped through her silk dress. She was hyperventilating, her chest heaving, as she stared at her reflection in the gold-rimmed mirror. She frantically swiped at her phone screen, trying to calculate how to secure $6,000 in 20 minutes. She had sold Richard Sterling a story of independent wealth. A single failed floral payment would crack that facade. She had not even begun to process the true gravity of her situation. She still thought this was just about the flowers. Before she could wipe the smeared mascara from under her eyes, her phone illuminated with a new automated email alert. It was a high-priority notification from Blue Stem Culinary. The subject line indicated a failed payment draft. The $32,000 invoice for the Wagyu beef and lobster tails had just bounced. The notification demanded an updated payment method within 24 hours to prevent immediate contract termination. The financial illusion had ruptured, and the real bleeding had just begun. The house was still recovering from the echo of Madison's panicked phone call when the heavy oak front door clicked open. I did not hear a knock. I did not hear the doorbell chime. I only heard the metallic scrape of a spare key turning the deadbolt. Liam and I exchanged a quick glance across the kitchen island. I straightened my posture. The cool composure I had maintained over the phone hardened into a solid shield. I knew exactly who was crossing the threshold. Brenda marched down the hallway. Her heels struck the hardwood floor with sharp, frantic snaps. She rounded the corner into the kitchen, clutching her designer handbag like a weapon. The polished, curated matriarch from the country club luncheon had vanished. Her peach suit looked rumpled. Her carefully sprayed hair was slightly out of place. Her chest heaved with shallow, rapid breaths. She locked eyes with me. "What is wrong with you?" Brenda demanded. Her voice shattered the quiet sanctuary of my home. The volume was deafening. "Madison is locked in a bathroom stall at the club having a panic attack. The caterer just sent her a default notice for $32,000. The florist is threatening to cancel the order. Mrs. Sterling is sitting in the lobby asking why the bride is crying." I kept my hands resting flat on the cool granite counter. I did not raise my voice. I did not match her frantic energy. I simply watched the panic radiate from her rigid posture. I transferred the liability I stated. I explained this to Madison on the phone. She claimed the date. She assumed the financial responsibility. Brenda threw her handbag onto the island. The heavy brass clasp clattered against the stone. "You did not transfer anything," she shrieked. "You abandoned your sister. You set her up to fail. You are embarrassing this family in front of Kyle's parents. Do you have any idea what Richard Sterling will do if he finds out Madison does not have the funds for this venue? He will cancel the engagement. He will ruin her reputation." She pointed a trembling finger at my chest. "Get your corporate card. Right now. You are going to log into those vendor portals, and you are going to restore the payment authorizations. We can figure out a repayment plan later. You are going to fix this." I looked at her trembling finger. For 28 years, that pointing digit had dictated my actions. It had directed me to yield, to apologize, to empty my pockets, to maintain the fragile illusion of our family's success. A profound, heavy realization washed over me. The magic trick was over. The guilt she was trying to weaponize felt entirely hollow. It possessed no power here. I stepped out from behind the kitchen island. I closed the physical distance between us, forcing Brenda to lower her hand. "There is no corporate card," I said. My voice was eerily calm. "Even if there was, I would not spend another dime on this family. We are done doing this, Mom." Brenda narrowed her eyes, her face flushing a deep, mottled red. "Done doing what? We are your family. We are supposed to help each other when things get difficult." "Help each other," I repeated. The phrase tasted like copper. "Let us talk about helping each other. Let us talk about the second mortgage you took out 5 years ago, the one you defaulted on because you wanted to remodel the guest bathroom and lease a luxury sedan. Do you remember who helped you then?" Brenda took a half step backward. Her eyes darted away, unable to maintain contact. "That was different. We were going through a rough patch. I was 24 years old." I continued stepping forward to close the gap. Again, I liquidated my entire retirement account. I paid the early withdrawal penalties out of my own pocket. I handed you a check for $22,000 so you would not lose your house. You stood in your pristine kitchen crying and promised you would pay me back every single cent. I paused, letting the silence stretch between us. The hum of the refrigerator filled the void. "It has been 60 months, Mom. Where is my repayment plan? Where is the check? You had enough money to buy that peach suit today. Madison had enough money to buy designer shoes. But neither of you had a single dollar for the daughter who kept a roof over your head." Brenda crossed her arms over her chest, a defensive barrier against the undeniable facts. "You are holding a grudge over ancient history. You have a great job. You make plenty of money. You are just being a selfish, jealous sister because Madison found a man who can actually provide for her. You could not handle the fact that she was getting a bigger, better wedding than you." The insult was designed to inflict maximum emotional damage. It was the ultimate deflection. In the past, being called jealous would have sent me into a spiral of self-doubt. I would have scrambled to prove my loyalty. Now, the accusation just sounded pathetic. It was the desperate thrashing of a manipulator losing her grip. I heard the floorboards creak behind me. Liam stepped out from the hallway. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace. He was significantly taller than Brenda, his broad shoulders filling the entryway to the kitchen. He did not yell. He did not threaten. He simply stood beside me, an immovable wall of support. Liam looked down at my mother. His expression was dangerously cold. "It is time for you to leave, Brenda." Brenda flinched. She was not used to being challenged by the men in our orbit. She usually charmed them or guilted them into compliance. Liam offered her nothing but a hard, unforgiving stare. "This is a private family matter, Liam," she snapped, attempting to reclaim her shattered authority. "You should stay out of it." "Jonah is my family," he replied smoothly, "and this is my house. I will not ask you a second time." Brenda looked back and forth between us. She realized she was outnumbered and outmatched. The emotional extortion had failed. The historical guilt had failed. The intimidation had failed. She reached for her handbag, her hands shaking so badly she knocked a coaster off the counter. It hit the floor with a dull thud. She gripped the leather straps of her purse. If you do this, Jonah, do not expect us to attend whatever cheap backyard ceremony you end up throwing together. If you let Madison lose this venue, you are dead to me. You will not have a mother. You will not have a sister. She wielded the threat of abandonment like a final, devastating blow. It was the ultimate sanction in her arsenal. Boycott the wedding. Boycott my life. I looked at the woman who had birthed me. I saw the calculation in her eyes, the desperate hope that the threat of isolation would break my resolve. I felt my pulse steady. The residual ties of obligation withered and blew away. I held out my right hand, palm facing up. Give me the spare key. Brenda stared at my open hand. The shock registered on her face, slackening her jaw. She expected tears. She expected a frantic negotiation. Give me the key, Mom. She unzipped a small compartment in her purse, her movements jerky and erratic. She pulled out the silver house key. She did not hand it to me. She threw it. The metal object struck the granite counter, spinning wildly, before coming to a rest near the sink. You are making a terrible mistake, Brenda hissed, her voice trembling with unadulterated venom. I looked at the silver key resting on the stone. Then I looked back at her. I am not having a wedding anymore, Mom. I am having peace. Brenda spun around. She marched down the hallway, her heels striking the wood with the heavy, uneven rhythm of a defeated retreat. The front door opened. The hinges groaned briefly before the heavy oak slammed shut. The impact rattled the framed photographs hanging on the entryway wall. The silence that followed was profound. It was not the tense waiting silence of an impending storm. It was the clear, ringing quiet that follows a physical break. The emotional umbilical cord that had fed off my compliance for nearly 3 decades was permanently severed. I stood in my kitchen, breathing in the unburdened air. Liam reached over and picked up the spare key from the counter. He dropped it into his pocket. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders, pulling me into a warm, solid embrace. I leaned my head against his chest, listening to the steady, reassuring rhythm of his heartbeat. We won, he murmured softly. I closed my eyes, letting the comfort of his presence anchor me. We survived the ambush, I corrected, but Madison still has to face the general manager. The operational phase was far from over. The vendor failures were just the skirmishes on the outer perimeter. The main battlefront was forming at the Grand Prairie Estate corporate office. The venue possessed a strict 48-hour cure period for any defaulted final payments. The clock had already started ticking. And I knew that Marcus Vance, the pragmatic facility director, did not care about broken families or crying brides. He only cared about the bottom line. Tomorrow morning, he was going to deliver a legal ultimatum that Madison could not charm her way out of. The prompt asks me to write Part 9 of the story, adhering to the outline, ensuring the length is at least 1,100 words, using AI voice-friendly formatting. No special punctuation like quotation marks, question marks, used as periods in previous turns, no ellipses, avoiding forbidden words and following the show don't tell rule. Let's begin writing Part 9. 10 days remained until the scheduled June event. Wednesday morning found me seated at my desk inside the regional logistics headquarters. My office overlooked the bustling warehouse floor, where forklifts hummed and pallets of freight shifted in endless orchestrated rhythms. I held a mug of black coffee, reviewing a quarterly transit report on my left monitor. My environment functioned on predictability. Everything possessed a tracking number. Every action carried a verifiable consequence. My personal email client sat open on my right monitor. At 9:15, a new message appeared in the inbox. The sender name read Marcus Vance. The subject line commanded immediate attention. Notice of default and pending contract termination. Marcus had addressed the email directly to Madison. My address sat quietly in the carbon copy line. The facility director was covering his legal bases, ensuring the primary signatory on the original deposit witnessed the final administrative execution. I opened the message. The text lacked any trace of the warm, hospitable tone the venue used in their marketing brochures. It was a masterpiece of cold, clinical, corporate terminology. It represented the unbreakable rules of modern American commerce. Dear Madison, the email began, this correspondence serves as official notification that your final payment draft in the amount of $35,000 generated a hard failure code at our merchant gateway yesterday afternoon. Per Section 7 of your assumed liability agreement, the Grand Prairie estate requires all event balances to clear 14 days prior to the reservation. I took a sip of my coffee. The dark roast tasted sharp and grounding. I kept reading. Because the automated draft failed, we can no longer accept standard credit routing for this invoice, Marcus wrote. To cure this default and prevent immediate cancellation of your June reservation, you must remit the full $35,000 balance via direct wire transfer. The funds must post to our receiving account within 48 hours. If we do not receive the wire by 5 o'clock on Friday, we will terminate the contract, lock the facility doors, and pursue the remaining balance through our collections agency. The $15,000 deposit remains non-refundable. There was no signature wishing her a beautiful wedding day, just the typed name of the general manager and a block of banking wire instructions. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair. A wire transfer. Marcus was demanding liquid cash. He was eliminating her ability to shuffle the debt onto another overextended credit line. To send a $35,000 wire, Madison actually needed $35,000 sitting in a verified bank account. 4 minutes passed. The warehouse floor continued its steady hum. A second email landed in my inbox. This one came from Madison. The subject line was blank. I clicked on the message. The polished, arrogant bride from the country club luncheon had vanished, replaced by a terrified woman watching the walls close in. Her message was a frantic stream of consciousness, stripped of capitalization and riddled with spelling errors. The facade of independent wealth had fractured beyond repair. "Jonah, please, you have to help me," Madison typed. "Marcus just sent me a wire demand for $35,000. I don't have that kind of cash liquid right now. The bank won't approve a personal loan this fast. Kyle will leave me if he finds out I lied about paying for the estate. His dad is already asking for the final receipt for the prenup paperwork. Please, just wire the money and I'll sign whatever repayment contract you want. I'll do anything. Please don't let them take the venue." I read the words twice. The desperation bled through the screen. She was begging for a rescue. She was offering to sign a repayment contract fully aware that she possessed zero means to honor it. Her core terror was finally exposed. It was never about losing the Emerald Orchids or the high-end catering. It was about losing Kyle. It was about the wealthy Sterling family discovering she was a financial fraud who manipulated their prenuptial negotiations. For a brief, fleeting second, the ghost of my former self stirred. The lifelong instinct to fix the problem flared in my chest, the urge to transfer funds to smooth over the crisis to prevent my sister from suffering public humiliation. Then I looked at the framed photograph sitting on my desk. It was a picture of Liam and me, standing in front of our Leawood house the day we closed the mortgage. We had built our life on honesty. We had built it on mutual respect. Madison had tried to hijack that stability to fund her own deception. The ghost vanished. The logistics director resumed control. I did not type a long emotional response. I did not argue with her logic. I did not point out the sheer audacity of asking for $35,000 after stealing my wedding date. Engaging in a dialogue would only signal that my boundaries were still open for negotiation. It would give her a sliver of hope that she could maneuver her way back to my wallet. Instead, I navigated to the encrypted folder on my hard drive. I selected the portable document format file Marcus had generated on Monday morning, the formal DocuSign liability transfer, the exact piece of paper Madison had demanded to secure her stolen stage. I attached the file to my reply. I opened the document highlighting tool. I drew a bright yellow digital box around Section 4, Paragraph 3. The clause stated clearly that the assuming party accepts full responsibility for all default penalties and acknowledges the strict, non-refundable nature of the cancellation policy. I did not add a greeting. I did not type a single word of text in the body of the email. I simply let the undeniable, time-stamped facts speak for themselves. I clicked send. The message disappeared into the digital ether, traveling instantly to a smartphone clutched in the trembling hands of a woman who had run out of runway. The conflict had officially pivoted. The annoyance of familial entitlement had burned away, leaving behind pure financial terror. Madison was trapped in a cage of her own design. I minimized my email client and returned to my transit reports. The machinery of my professional life continued to run smoothly, a stark contrast to the wreckage accumulating across town. As I reviewed a shipping manifest, my mind calculated the remaining variables. The 48-hour clock was ticking down. Madison stood at a brutal crossroad. She had two choices, and both led to devastation. She could confess the truth to Kyle. She could walk into his luxury apartment, look into the eyes of a man who despised dishonesty, and admit that she possessed no money, no venue, and no integrity. She could admit that the story she sold his powerful father was a calculated fabrication. Or she could attempt to bury the lie deeper. She could venture into the shadowy corners of the American lending market. She could seek out a predatory high-interest signature loan. She could leverage her car title, falsify income documents, and take on a ruinous amount of toxic debt just to keep the ballroom doors open for one single Saturday. I knew my sister. I knew the depths of her pride and her paralyzing fear of losing social status. She would rather drown in debt than admit she was broke. The question pulling the narrative forward was no longer if Madison would fall. The question was how much collateral damage she would inflict on her own life before she finally hit the ground. The countdown to Friday afternoon had begun, and the silence from her end of the city felt like the slow draw of breath before a scream. Thursday evening brought a heavy thunderstorm across the Kansas plains. Lightning flashed through the living room windows, casting sharp shadows against the walls. The house was otherwise quiet. Liam stood in the kitchen, slicing fresh tomatoes for a salad. I sat on the sofa with my laptop resting on my knees, running a final audit on my supply chain spreadsheets. My phone rested on the coffee table. At 7:15, the device buzzed, a short, singular vibration. Then another, then 5 more in rapid succession. The device began to inch across the polished wood surface, propelled by a relentless barrage of incoming notifications. I set the laptop aside and picked up the phone. The screen displayed 20 new messages in the Ralphie family network. It was a private group chat containing Brenda Madison, myself, and a dozen extended relatives scattered between Topeka and Wichita. This included Aunt Susan, a woman who treated passive direction as a competitive sport, and Uncle Robert, an insurance adjuster who loved dispensing unsolicited life advice. I tapped the screen to open the thread. The newest edition was a video file uploaded by Madison just 3 minutes prior. I pressed play. Madison sat in the front seat of her luxury sedan. The interior dome light illuminated her face, highlighting the fresh streaks of mascara running down her cheeks. She was putting on a masterclass in performative despair. Her breathing sounded jagged and irregular. She clutched a crumpled tissue in one hand, pressing it against her collarbone. "I cannot believe I even have to say this," Madison began, her voice trembling, staring directly into the camera lens. "Jonah just canceled my entire wedding." She paused to let out a ragged sob. She wiped her eyes, smudging the dark makeup further down her face to ensure the maximum visual impact. I tried to include her. Madison continued weaving a brilliant tapestry of fiction. I tried to be a good sister, but she has been so bitter ever since Kyle proposed. She could not handle the fact that my fiancé has resources. She could not stand seeing me happy. So she logged into all my vendor accounts and canceled the caterer, the florist, and the brass band. She stole my dream day just to punish me for finding a successful man. I am sitting here 48 hours before my rehearsal dinner with nothing. She destroyed my wedding. The video ended. I stared at the dark screen. The audacity was breathtaking. Unable to secure the predatory high-interest loan she needed to cover her $35,000 debt, Madison had executed a desperate social maneuver. She was cornered. The venue deadline was closing in. Her financial reality was imploding. Instead of admitting her fraud, she decided to weaponize the extended family against me. She was banking on the sheer weight of their collective judgment to break my resolve and force me to reopen my wallet to save her reputation. The typing indicators began to dance at the bottom of the screen, 3 gray dots appearing and disappearing as the aunts and uncles drafted their verdicts. Aunt Susan fired the first shot. "Jonah Ralphie, I am sick to my stomach. How could you be so cruel to your own flesh and blood?" Uncle Robert followed seconds later. "This is a new low, even for you. Your mother must be devastated. You need to fix this right now, or you are no longer welcome at our Thanksgiving table." Cousin Emily, who had not spoken to me in 4 years, chimed in. Pure jealousy. "You have always been spiteful, Jonah. You owe Madison a huge apology and a blank check." The phone vibrated endlessly. The text messages stacked up, forming a towering wall of condemnation. Disgrace, ungrateful, unhinged, bitter. They swarmed the chat, eager to participate in a public execution. I remembered a family reunion when I was 16. I had spent all summer working at a local bakery to buy a used car. Madison, who was 19 and had squandered her own allowance on clothes, convinced Brenda that it was unfair for the younger sister to drive first. Brenda forced me to hand over the keys to Madison. When I cried, the aunt and uncles gathered around and told me I was being selfish. They told me family shared. They told me to stop making a scene. I gave up the keys that day. I swallowed the injustice because I thought their approval equaled love. Tonight, looking at the vitriol pouring across the digital screen, I felt a deep, profound calm. The pressure cooker had reached its peak temperature, but I was no longer trapped inside it. Liam walked out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He noticed the steady buzzing of the phone and the rigid line of my shoulders. "What is happening?" he asked. I handed him the device. He watched the video in silence. He scrolled through the barrage of insults, his jaw clenched, a muscle feathering near his temple. "This is character assassination," Liam stated, his voice tight. "She is trying to ruin you in front of everyone you know. Do you want me to call Greg and draft a cease and desist letter? We can sue her for defamation." I took the phone back from his hand. "No," I replied. "Defamation lawsuits take months. I am going to end this right now." I did not type a defensive paragraph. I did not attempt to appeal to their logic or explain the intricate details of the prenuptial deception. Engaging in an emotional debate would only fuel their righteous indignation. It would validate their assumed authority over my life. The only way to neutralize a smear campaign is to introduce an indisputable lethal dose of reality. I unlocked my laptop and opened the secure encrypted folder sitting on the desktop. First, I accessed my backed-up text messages. I navigated to the exchange Madison and I had 3 weeks prior, right after I caught her changing the floral arrangements in the ballroom. I took a high-resolution screenshot of her exact words. "You can just do something smaller. Thanks for the venue." Next, I opened the portable document format file I had secured from Marcus Vance. The formal liability transfer. The document bore the official letterhead of the Grand Prairie estate. It outlined the release of my obligations and clearly stated that Madison Ralphie assumed total financial responsibility for the June date. Her electronic signature sat clearly at the bottom of the page, time-stamped and legally binding. I took a screenshot of that page, ensuring the signature and the cancellation penalty clause were highly visible. I transferred both image files to my phone. The group chat was still moving rapidly. Aunt Susan was currently drafting a lengthy message about the importance of Christian forgiveness and demanding I wire Madison the funds to restore the catering order. I tapped the photo attachment icon. I selected the screenshot of Madison's text message. I selected the screenshot of the venue liability transfer. I did not type a single word of commentary. I did not add a caption. I let the time-stamped forensic evidence stand alone. I pressed send. The 2 images loaded into the chat stream, appearing right beneath Aunt Susan's demand for a blank check. I sat back against the sofa cushions and watched the screen. For the first 10 seconds, nothing happened. The typing indicators were still flashing. They were drafting their next wave of insults, unaware of the payload that had just dropped into the thread. Then, Uncle Robert's typing indicator vanished. Aunt Susan's gray dots disappeared. Cousin Emily's status went blank. One by one, the read receipts popped up beneath my images. Read by Susan, read by Robert, read by Emily, read by Brenda. The chat went dead silent. The relentless vibration of the phone ceased. The silence that filled my living room was deafening. It was a heavy, suffocating quiet spreading across half the state of Kansas. Dozens of people were staring at their screens, processing the undeniable truth. They were reading Madison's own arrogant words, thanking me for giving up the venue. They were reviewing a legal document, proving Madison had willingly demanded the financial liability. The narrative of the jealous, spiteful younger sister stealing a dream wedding evaporated instantly. The facts laid bare the undeniable reality. Madison was not a victim. She was a thief who had stolen a car and was now crying because she could not afford the gasoline. I waited 5 minutes. Not a single relative typed a reply. No apologies came through. No retractions. The extended family simply retreated into the shadows, paralyzed by the sheer unarguable weight of the evidence. They could not defend her without looking like fools, and they lacked the integrity to apologize to me. I locked my phone screen and set it down on the table. Liam let out a low whistle. He leaned down and kissed the top of my head. "That was surgical," he murmured. "It was necessary," I said. The social pressure was flawlessly neutralized. The aunts and uncles would never view Madison the same way again. Brenda would have to face the quiet judgment of her peers. The family trap had snapped shut on empty air. But while the digital battlefield had grown quiet, the real war was entering its final phase. Madison had failed to secure the funds. She had failed to extort the money from me through social humiliation. She had exhausted every avenue of escape. The 48-hour deadline established by the venue was rapidly approaching, and her intricate web of lies was beginning to unravel in the real world. Because while the extended family was now aware of her deception, the groom was still entirely in the dark. Kyle believed he was marrying a wealthy, independent woman. He had no idea his phone was about to become the focal point of a financial disaster. And I was about to make sure he received the exact same forensic treatment. Friday morning arrived with a crisp, clear sky sweeping away the heavy humidity of the previous night. I stood in my kitchen pouring freshly brewed coffee into a ceramic travel mug. The silence in the house felt different today. It was no longer the tense, waiting quiet of a loaded spring. It was the vast, open stillness of a battlefield after the opposing army has retreated. The family group chat had remained dormant for 12 hours. My mother had not called. My aunts had retreated to their respective corners, nursing their fractured pride. At 8:15, my phone vibrated against the granite counter. The screen illuminated, displaying a name I did not expect to see. Kyle Sterling. I stared at the caller identification. Kyle and I had only spoken a handful of times during brief family dinners. He was a guarded, observant man. Despite his father's immense wealth and position as a senior corporate partner, Kyle did not fit the stereotype of a careless heir. He had spent his 20s building his own commercial logistics company from the ground up, managing freight schedules and warehouse operations, before merging his firm with the Sterling family portfolio. He respected hard work. He valued transparency. Most importantly, his professional background meant he despised unpaid invoices and operational dishonesty. I picked up the device and swiped to answer. "Good morning, Kyle." "Jonah." His voice sounded tight, clipped at the edges. "I am sorry to call you this early before work. Do you have a minute?" "I have a minute," I replied, leaning against the counter. He exhaled a long breath. The sound carried the distinct friction of a man trying to suppress his frustration. I just received a rather alarming phone call from a woman named Sarah at Blue Stem Culinary. 5 minutes later, a florist named Elise called me. They both claimed they are holding delinquent invoices for the wedding tomorrow. Madison apparently listed my personal cell phone as the secondary emergency contact on the vendor forms. I took a sip of my coffee, letting him lay out the situation. He was gathering data, trying to make sense of a broken supply chain. Madison told me there was a simple banking glitch with her checking account. Kyle continued. She said the merchant gateways flagged her card for fraud because the charges were unusually high. She is currently locked in our guest bedroom, crying on the phone with her bank. But Sarah from the catering company mentioned something about a formal liability transfer. She said you canceled the original contracts. I need to know what is actually happening. I listened to the steady hum of my refrigerator. Madison was still trying to spin a narrative. Even with the walls closing in, she clung to the illusion, hoping she could convince him it was a minor technical error. She was underestimating her fiancé. Kyle managed logistics for a living. He knew that multiple simultaneous payment failures across independent merchant gateways did not indicate a banking glitch. They indicated a zero balance. Kyle, are you sitting at a computer right now? I asked. Yes, I am in my home office. Give me your direct email address. He recited it without hesitation. He did not ask why I needed it. He recognized the tone of a fellow professional preparing to deliver hard data. I walked down the hallway to my own office and woke my laptop from sleep mode. I opened my secure email client and drafted a new message. I did not write a lengthy explanation. I did not offer any emotional commentary regarding my sister's behavior. I simply attached the files from the encrypted folder I had built 2 nights prior. I attached the original Grand Prairie Estate Master Agreement showing my signature and the cleared $15,000 deposit. I attached the text message screenshot where Madison thanked me for giving up the venue. I attached the DocuSign liability transfer bearing her electronic signature, proving she willingly assumed the remaining debt. Finally, I attached the ultimate payload, the forwarded email chain between Madison the caterer and Richard Sterling, where she explicitly claimed to have paid the $50,000 venue fee in cash to manipulate the asset disclosure terms of the prenuptial agreement. I sent the message. Refresh your inbox, I instructed over the phone. I heard the faint clicking of his mouse. A few seconds later, his breathing shifted. He had opened the attachments. I stayed on the line listening as Kyle Sterling dismantled his own future. The silence stretched, heavy and profound. It was the sound of an illusion shattering into 1,000 irreparable pieces. I knew exactly which document he was reading by the subtle changes in his breathing. First, he saw the text message, the proof that Madison had hijacked my reservation. Next, he saw the venue transfer. The realization hit him that she possessed a $35,000 invoice she could not cover. Then he reached the email chain. The click of his mouse stopped. The silence deepened, turning brittle and cold. He was reading the correspondence between his future wife and his father. He was looking at the calculated lie regarding her independent wealth. He was processing the fact that she had used a stolen venue date to manufacture a fictitious asset portfolio, all designed to secure a more lucrative divorce settlement before she even walked down the aisle. Kyle was a man who built his life on verifiable metrics. He required transparency in his contracts. He had chosen Madison because she presented herself as an independent, successful woman who did not need his money. He thought he was marrying an equal partner. The digital files resting on his monitor proved he was marrying a financial predator. Jonah Kyle finally spoke. His voice had lost all trace of its former frustration. It was now deadly quiet. The tone of a man standing in the wreckage of a burned building examining the ashes. Yes, I answered. She has no money, he stated. It was not a question. It was a final, devastating conclusion. She never paid the deposit. She took your date. She expected you to pay the balance so she could hand my father a zero-balance receipt. That is correct, I confirmed. The venue requires the remaining $35,000 via wire transfer by 5 o'clock today. If the funds do not post, the estate will lock the doors. The catering and floral contracts are already in default." Another long pause followed. I could picture him sitting in his high-rise office downtown, looking toward the closed door of the guest bedroom where Madison was weaving her final, desperate lies. The contrast between her fabricated banking glitch and the time-stamped legal documents on his screen left no room for interpretation. The fraud was undeniable. Kyle cleared his throat. The sound was tight controlled. "I appreciate your transparency, Jonah. Thank you for sending this directly to me." "You deserve to know the truth before you sign a marriage license," I said. "I will handle it from here," he replied. "Have a good Friday." The line clicked dead. I lowered the phone from my ear. The conversation had lasted less than 4 minutes. In that brief window of time, the entire trajectory of Madison's life had irrevocably altered. She had spent months carefully constructing a golden cage, weaving deceit and entitlement into a flawless presentation. She thought her greatest obstacle was securing the funds from me. She failed to realize her greatest threat was the truth reaching the man holding the keys to her future. The tension in the narrative skyrocketed to a fever pitch. The venue deadline of 5 o'clock no longer mattered. The threatening emails from the florist and the caterer were irrelevant. Madison was no longer just fighting to keep a luxury wedding estate. She was about to face the wrath of a self-made man who had just discovered his bride was a con artist. Tonight was the scheduled rehearsal dinner at the high-end downtown steakhouse. The reservations were locked, the extended families were gathering. Kyle's formidable parents were expecting to toast the happy couple. I set my phone down on the desk, knowing that when the sun set over Kansas City this evening, there would be no celebration. There would only be a public reckoning, and I held a front row seat to the fallout. Friday evening draped Kansas City in a deep indigo twilight. Liam and I walked through the heavy brass doors of a premier downtown steakhouse. The establishment catered to corporate executives and generational wealth. The air inside smelled of dry-aged ribeye and expensive cedar. We bypassed the crowded main dining room and followed the hostess toward the private banquet suites in the back. The rehearsal dinner was the final social hurdle before the scheduled wedding. It was a tradition meant to unify two families. Tonight, it served as a gilded cage. I stepped into the private suite. Soft amber lighting illuminated long tables draped in heavy white linen. Crystal wine glasses caught the ambient glow. Waitstaff moved with silent precision, filling water goblets and offering silver trays of hors d'oeuvres. The Sterling family occupied the far side of the room. Richard Sterling stood near the private bar, swirling a glass of scotch. He possessed the intimidating posture of a man who spent decades dismantling hostile witnesses in federal court. His wife stood beside him, draped in understated pearls. They projected an aura of impenetrable status. Madison stood near them. She wore a tailored ivory cocktail dress that exposed her shoulders. She laughed at a joke Richard made, tossing her hair back with practiced elegance. To the untrained observer, she looked radiant. To me, she looked like a woman standing on a trap door. The 5 o'clock wire deadline at the Grand Prairie estate had passed exactly 2 hours ago. The venue administration had officially terminated the contract. The grand ballroom doors were padlocked. The floral orders were canceled. The Wagyu beef remained frozen in a warehouse. Madison knew this. Her phone had undoubtedly received the final default notices. Yet she stood in the steakhouse, sipping champagne, clinging to the desperate hope that she could leverage Kyle's checkbook in the morning before the truth leaked out. She still believed she controlled the narrative. Brenda intercepted us near the entrance. She wore a dark blue evening gown. Her smile was tight, her eyes darting nervously toward the Sterling family. She grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into the fabric of my sleeve. "Please do not cause a scene tonight," Brenda whispered. The words hissed through her clenched teeth. "Madison is under an immense amount of stress. Just sit at your assigned table and eat your dinner." I detached her fingers from my arm. "I am just here for the steak, Mom." Liam guided me toward our seats near the back of the suite. We sat down as the remaining guests filtered into the room. The aunts and uncles who had crucified me in the group chat the night before refused to meet my gaze. They stared at their menus or engaged in forced, overly enthusiastic conversations about the weather. The social dynamic had shifted. They recognized the precarious nature of the evening, even if they did not comprehend the true scale of the impending disaster. I watched Kyle. The groom sat at the head table. He did not smile. He did not touch his champagne. He drank sparkling water with a twist of lemon. His posture was rigid, his broad shoulders set in a hard, uncompromising line. He looked like a chief executive officer preparing to fire a negligent board of directors. Madison sat next to him, placing her hand on his thigh, leaning in to whisper in his ear. Kyle did not lean back. He endured her touch with glacial indifference. The first course arrived. Servers placed bowls of lobster bisque in front of the guests. The room filled with the gentle clatter of silver spoons against porcelain. The tension in the air grew thick, pressing against my eardrums. It was the atmospheric pressure drop right before a tornado touches down. Kyle waited until the servers cleared the soup bowls. The main course of filet mignon and roasted asparagus was minutes away. He stood up. He did not tap his glass with a knife. He did not ask for attention. His mere act of standing slow and deliberate commanded the room. The conversation died away. Dozens of faces turned toward the head table. Brenda beamed, leaning forward in her chair, anticipating a romantic declaration. Madison looked up at him, her eyes wide, arranging her features into an expression of flawless adoration. Kyle looked out over the assembly. His gaze swept past the extended relatives and settled on his own parents. Then he looked down at the woman sitting beside him. "A marriage is a contract," Kyle began. His voice was low, carrying effortlessly across the silent room. "It requires mutual respect. It requires a shared foundation. Most importantly, it requires transparency. When you enter into a partnership, you have to trust that the person standing next to you is presenting their authentic self." Madison smiled, reaching for his hand. Kyle stepped back, leaving her hand hovering over the empty space. Her smile faltered. "My father spent the last 3 weeks negotiating a prenuptial agreement." Kyle continued, shifting his attention back to Richard Sterling. During that process, Madison provided written documentation regarding her independent assets. She claimed she paid a $50,000 cash deposit to secure the Grand Prairie estate. She used that claim to negotiate a more favorable payout clause. Richard Sterling lowered his glass of scotch. His spine stiffened. The seasoned attorney instantly recognized the tone of a breach. Kyle reached into the inner breast pocket of his tailored suit jacket. He extracted a folded piece of heavy stock paper. "I spent my morning reviewing the actual accounting records for tomorrow," Kyle said. His voice turned razor sharp, stripping away the polite veneer of the rehearsal dinner. Madison did not pay the deposit. She hijacked the reservation from her younger sister. Furthermore, she did not possess the funds to cover the remaining balance. He unfolded the paper. "The venue required a final wire transfer of $35,000 by 5 o'clock this afternoon," Kyle stated. The funds were not remitted. The estate management terminated the contract 2 hours ago. "The doors are locked. The catering is canceled. There is no wedding tomorrow." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Aunt Susan dropped her cloth napkin. Brenda stood up her chair, scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. "Kyle, please," Brenda stammered, her face draining of color. "There must be a misunderstanding. The bank made an error." "There is no error," Kyle replied. He looked directly at Madison. The adoration on her face had melted into sheer, unadulterated terror. She sat frozen, her lips parted, unable to form a single word of defense. The truth pinned her to the chair. Kyle placed the folded document onto her porcelain bread plate. It was the official venue invoice displaying the delinquent $35,000 balance. He placed a second document right beside it, the DocuSign liability transfer bearing her signature. "I will not bind my life to a woman who steals from her own family," Kyle said. "I will not marry someone who commits financial fraud to manipulate a legal document." He turned toward his parents. "Richard, gather your things. We are leaving." Kyle turned his back on the head table and walked down the center aisle of the private suite. He did not look back. He did not wait for an apology. He moved with the decisive, ruthless efficiency of a man severing a toxic asset. The silence that followed his exit lasted for 3 agonizing seconds. Then, Madison shattered. A raw, jagged wail erupted from her throat. She collapsed forward over the table, her hands grasping the pristine white linen, pulling it tight enough to rattle the silverware. The carefully constructed facade of the wealthy, independent bride disintegrated into a puddle of ruined makeup and hysterical sobs. Richard Sterling stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket. He looked down at Madison with an expression of pure, unvarnished revulsion. He looked at Brenda, his eyes narrowing in disgust. The Sterling family did not tolerate public humiliation, and they certainly did not tolerate fraud. Richard offered his arm to his wife. They walked out of the suite in total silence, their departure finalizing the execution. Brenda snapped out of her shock. She scrambled around the tables, her heels slipping on the polished floor. She ran out the heavy brass doors, chasing the fading shadows of the Sterling family into the downtown parking lot. I remained seated near the back of the room. Liam held my hand under the table. The aunts and uncles sat paralyzed in their chairs, watching the golden child of the family sob uncontrollably over an unpaid invoice. The climax had arrived, brutal and efficient. I had not raised my voice. I had not thrown a single insult. The undeniable consequences of her own lies had delivered the final, devastating blow. The rehearsal dinner was a graveyard. But the nightmare for Madison was not entirely over. She had lost the groom, she had lost the venue, but the American billing system does not forgive a debt just because a relationship ends. The $35,000 invoice resting on her porcelain plate still demanded payment, and the corporate entities holding the breached contracts were preparing to collect. Saturday morning arrived over Kansas with a brilliant, mocking sunrise. The sky was a clear, vivid blue. It was the perfect weather for a high society June event. But the wrought iron gates at the entrance of the Grand Prairie estate remained shut. A heavy steel padlock secured the chain wrapping the center bars. Beyond the gates, the sprawling limestone mansion sat in pristine isolation. The grand ballroom, which should have been buzzing with caterers and lighting technicians, remained dark. The tables sat bare. The champagne fountains were dry. The emerald orchids Madison had demanded were already gone. Elise, the pragmatic floral designer, had cut her losses early that morning. She rerouted the exotic blooms to a corporate technology gala taking place at a hotel across town. The business of event planning stops for no one. If the check does not clear, the inventory moves to the next paying client. A silver luxury utility vehicle idled in the gravel parking lot just outside the estate gates. The engine hummed, keeping the air conditioning running against the rising summer heat. Inside the passenger seat, Madison stared through the tinted glass. She wore gray sweatpants and an oversized college sweatshirt. Her hair, usually blown out to perfection, hung in tangled, unwashed strands around her pale face. The contrast was staggering. 24 hours earlier, she had paraded around the country club in designer silk, projecting the image of a wealthy bride. Now, she looked like a phantom haunting the perimeter of a life she could not afford. Brenda sat behind the steering wheel. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the leather rim. She stared straight ahead, unable to look at her eldest daughter. The silence inside the vehicle was thick, suffocating, and heavy with the weight of profound failure. Madison had forced Brenda to drive her to the venue at 8 in the morning. A part of her fractured psyche still clung to denial. She believed that if she just showed up, the gates would open. She believed Marcus Vance would take pity on a crying bride and unlock the ballroom doors. She had spent her entire existence operating under the assumption that rules applied to other people. She stole a magnificent stage, maneuvering and manipulating to secure the prime date. But sitting in the gravel lot, the hollow reality of her entitlement finally settled into her bones. A stage is useless if you do not pay the production crew to turn on the lights. Madison pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the passenger window. Kyle had blocked her phone number late last night. The Sterling family had severed all communication channels. The wealthy in-laws, the elite social circle, the lucrative prenuptial agreement, all of it had evaporated into the Kansas air. She was left with nothing but an empty parking lot and a mother who was rapidly realizing the true cost of their shared deception. While Madison stared at the padlocked iron gates, I stood in my kitchen in Leawood. The morning sun poured through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The house was quiet, orderly, and deeply peaceful. I zipped a leather duffel bag resting on the granite island. Liam walked into the room carrying his own canvas weekender bag. He wore dark denim jeans and a simple gray t-shirt. He set his bag on the floor and walked over to the coffee maker. The contrast between my reality and the wreckage playing out across town was stark. Madison was suffocating in the chaotic, humiliating downfall she had engineered. I was operating with deliberate, structured intent. I was physically removing myself from the geographic location of my family's ruin. "We are making good time," Liam said, checking the silver watch on his left wrist. "The car service arrives in 20 minutes. I poured the last of the coffee into my ceramic travel mug. "I am ready," I replied. My childhood was defined by geographical traps. Whenever Brenda created a financial crisis, she demanded my physical presence. She expected me to sit at her kitchen table, review her past due notices, and write the checks to save her. I was the designated anchor holding her sinking ship steady. Today, I was cutting the anchor chain entirely. Liam and I walked out the front door. I locked the deadbolt securing the sanctuary we had built together. A black luxury sedan idled at the curb. The driver loaded our bags into the trunk. We slid into the spacious back seat. The leather smelled new and clean. "Take us to Kansas City International," Liam instructed the driver. The sedan pulled away from the curb. I watched my quiet neighborhood roll past the tinted windows. The knot of anxiety that usually accompanied family interactions had dissolved. It was replaced by a profound, settling sense of poetic justice. Madison had tried to force me into submission using social pressure and emotional manipulation. She had tried to steal my future to fund her own lies. By doing nothing, by simply enforcing a legal boundary and stepping out of the way, I had allowed her own entitlement to destroy her. The driver merged onto the highway. The city skyline appeared in the distance. Liam reached across the center console and took my hand. His grip was warm and steady. "You did not check your phone this morning," he noted. I looked down at the device resting in my purse. "There is nothing I need to see," I said. Liam understood the profound shift in my behavior. When we first started dating 4 years ago, my phone was a source of constant anxiety. A single text message from Brenda could derail our weekend plans. If Madison needed emergency funds for a designer handbag she had impulsively purchased on credit, I would spend hours rearranging my budget to accommodate her. Liam had watched me shrink my own life to fit their endless demands. He never issued ultimatums. He simply provided a steady, logical counterweight to their emotional chaos. He showed me what a healthy partnership looked like, making the toxicity of my blood relatives impossible to ignore. Now, sitting in the back of the town car, I felt the physical weight of that past life lifting off my shoulders. The highway miles ticked by, putting physical distance between my peace and their disaster. Back at the Grand Prairie estate, the morning sun climbed higher into the sky. The temperature in the gravel parking lot began to rise. Brenda finally shifted the silver utility vehicle into gear. She knew Marcus Vance would soon arrive to inspect the grounds, and she did not want to face the venue manager. "We need to go home, Madison," Brenda said. Her voice was flat, devoid of its usual arrogant lilt. Madison did not argue. She kept her forehead pressed against the glass, watching the locked gates recede as the vehicle pulled onto the main road. The wedding was dead. The social climbing endeavor was over. But the American commercial machine does not care about broken hearts or canceled ceremonies. As Brenda drove back toward Olathe in grim silence, the administrative software at the Grand Prairie estate executed its scheduled Saturday protocol. The system recognized that the June event date had arrived without a cleared final balance. The accounting ledger showed a delinquent sum of $35,000 associated with the legal profile of Madison Ralphie. The software automatically generated a default finalization report. It packaged the initial signed contract, the electronic liability transfer, and the failed payment logs into a secure digital dossier. When dealing with large unsecured debts, premium venues do not waste time making polite phone calls. They utilize specialized third-party agencies to recover their lost revenue. The venue software routed Madison's dossier directly to a corporate collections firm based in Chicago. The narrative was shifting gears. The social humiliation was complete, but the financial reckoning was just beginning. The venue was not the only entity seeking restitution. The catering company held an unpaid invoice for Wagyu beef that had already been procured. The floral designer possessed $6,000 worth of exotic orchids that could only be partially recouped. The credit reporting bureaus would soon receive the derogatory marks. Her ability to lease a car, secure an apartment, or obtain a simple credit card would vanish. Madison had spent her entire life believing she was immune to consequences because I always balanced her ledger. She thought her greatest punishment was losing Kyle and the country club lifestyle. She failed to realize that the signed documents resting on the desks of corporate auditors were about to initiate a relentless, systematic dismantling of her financial future. The town car arrived at the airport terminal. Liam and I stepped out into the bustling departure lane. The automatic doors slid open, welcoming us into a building designed for forward momentum. I checked our flight itinerary on the digital departure board. The destination was bright, warm, and entirely disconnected from the Kansas plains. I linked my arm through Liam's. The air inside the terminal smelled of roasted coffee and possibility. The drama of the stolen venue was behind us, but I knew the automated billing cycles back home were preparing to deliver a final, inescapable verdict. The debt had to be paid, and the collectors were already dialing her number. The Kansas City International Airport terminal hummed with the quiet efficiency of early morning travel. Travelers rushed past the security checkpoints, dragging rolling suitcases and clutching paper coffee cups. Liam and I bypassed the crowded main concourse and walked through the frosted glass doors of the premium airline lounge. The interior space offered a stark contrast to the chaos outside. It smelled of fresh espresso and rich leather upholstery. We sat in a pair of deep wingback chairs overlooking the expansive tarmac. I looked at the printed boarding passes resting on the small mahogany table between us. The destination code read UVF, Huonora International Airport. "You rebooked the flights," I said, tracing the bold black letters with my index finger. Liam leaned back and crossed his ankles, watching a baggage cart glide across the concrete outside. "Boston did not seem appealing after the week we just endured," he replied. "I canceled the original itinerary on Wednesday afternoon. I figured we could use some Caribbean sun instead." I looked at him, feeling a sudden wave of profound gratitude. During my 20s, I never took a real vacation. If I managed to save enough paid time off, Brenda invariably manufactured a crisis requiring my financial intervention and physical presence. I spent my holidays painting her living room or fixing Madison's broken appliances. Liam understood that my compliance was a learned survival mechanism. He actively dismantled those old habits by replacing them with undeniable peace. My phone buzzed against the marble tabletop, the screen illuminated with Brenda's name. The incoming call icon flashed, demanding my immediate attention. I did not answer. I watched the screen fade to black as the call rolled to the answering service. A minute later, a voicemail notification appeared. I picked up the device and pressed the speaker icon. I kept the volume low, ensuring only Liam and I could hear the audio. Brenda's voice flooded the quiet space. It lacked her usual polished country club cadence. She sounded feral, her vocal cords straining under the weight of her unrestrained fury. "Jonah, Ralphie, you are a monster," Brenda shrieked through the tiny speaker. "Madison is sitting in a parking lot having a nervous breakdown. The venue is locked. Her fiancé left her. You destroyed your sister's life over a petty grudge. I hope you are happy. You are no longer my daughter. Do not ever call me again." The recording ended with a sharp click. I set the phone down. For 3 decades, a message like that would have sent me into a spiral of panic. I would have drafted a dozen frantic apologies. I would have scrambled to transfer funds to repair the damage and buy back her affection. Today, the words held zero gravity. The threat of abandonment was hollow because I had already left the building. I tapped the screen. I swiped left on the audio file and hit delete. I navigated to her contact profile. I scrolled down to the bottom of the display and selected the Block Caller option. The operating system asked for confirmation. I tapped yes. I performed the exact same action for Madison's number. I picked up my mimosa. The crystal flute felt cold and solid in my hand. I took a slow sip, tasting the sharp citrus and crisp champagne. The emotional umbilical cord was gone. While I tasted freedom in the airport lounge, the operational machinery of the American commercial sector delivered its final verdict across town. The 48-hour cure period at the Grand Prairie estate had officially expired. Marcus Vance did not harbor any sentimental illusions regarding uncollected debt. The hospitality industry operates on razor-thin margins, and a $35,000 deficit requires immediate, ruthless mitigation. At precisely 10 o'clock in the morning, the venue accounting software executed an automated batch protocol. It compiled the signed master agreement, the DocuSign liability transfer, and the digital logs of the failed merchant drafts. The system encrypted the dossier and transmitted it directly to a commercial collections agency based in Chicago. The agency specialized in high-yield, unsecured debt recovery. They did not operate with empathy. They functioned on algorithms and relentless asset tracing. Within 10 minutes of receiving the file, the agency software initiated a hard inquiry on Madison's Social Security number. The system logged the $35,000 debt as a severe default. The consequences of a severe default on a credit profile are instantaneous and devastating. The major reporting bureaus received the derogatory data packet. Madison's credit score, already strained by high utilization ratios on her boutique retail cards, went into a catastrophic freefall. It dropped over 100 points in a single afternoon. She was no longer just a bride without a venue. She was a profound financial liability. The invisible numbers that dictate participation in modern society had turned against her. Her ability to lease a decent apartment, finance a reliable vehicle, or even secure a basic cellular contract evaporated. She had traded her long-term economic viability for a few weeks of manufactured social status. The true depth of that miscalculation became apparent on Monday morning. Richard Sterling sat in his expansive corner office overlooking the Kansas City skyline. The senior corporate partner was executing the legal dissolution of his son's engagement. The Sterling family protected their assets with fortress-level security. During the brief relationship, Kyle had provided Madison with several high-value gifts, including a customized luxury vehicle lease and the engagement ring itself. Richard required a clean, legally binding separation agreement to ensure Madison could not lay claim to any shared property under common law statutes. As part of his standard due diligence protocol, he directed his paralegal team to run a comprehensive financial background check on the former bride. The paralegal submitted the inquiry. The results returned almost immediately, flagged with stark red warning indicators. Richard reviewed the digital report on his dual monitors. He saw the staggering credit utilization. He noted the late payment history on her revolving accounts. Then his eyes locked onto the newest entry under the public records section, a $35,000 collection account filed by the Grand Prairie estate. The date of the default coincided perfectly with the weekend of the canceled wedding. The financial fraud Kyle had exposed at the rehearsal dinner was now a matter of verifiable public record. Madison had indeed signed a liability transfer she could not honor. Richard picked up his phone and dialed his son. Kyle answered on the second ring. The background report just came back. Richard stated, his tone dripping with professional disdain, "She is entirely insolvent. The venue sent her to collections this weekend. The liability is documented and severe." "What is our next step?" Kyle asked. His voice remained cool, detached from the emotional wreckage of the weekend. "We offer her nothing," Richard replied. Normally, affluent families breaking an engagement will offer a modest severance package to ensure the former partner signs a non-disclosure agreement and walks away quietly. Richard had initially prepared a small settlement fund to quickly erase Madison from their lives. The collection hit changed the legal strategy. Richard knew that a person drowning in public debt possessed zero leverage in a negotiation. If he handed her a settlement check, the collections agency would immediately petition the courts to garnish the funds. She was legally toxic. Richard drafted a single, unyielding legal demand. Madison was required to surrender the engagement ring and the keys to the leased vehicle by 5 o'clock that evening. If she refused, Richard promised to file a police report for grand theft and initiate a civil lawsuit for fraudulent misrepresentation during the prenuptial drafting phase. He sent the document via registered courier to her apartment. Madison received the thick manila envelope just as the reality of her ruined credit score began to sink in. She sat on the floor of her bedroom, holding the heavy diamond ring in her palm. The stone caught the afternoon light, throwing sharp, brilliant prisms across the walls. It was the physical manifestation of the wealthy life she had nearly stolen. She read the legal demand letter. The stark, unforgiving language left no room for negotiation or tears. Richard Sterling was not Brenda. He could not be manipulated by a crying performance. He operated on leverage, and Madison held none. She realized with a crushing finality that she had gambled everything on a lie and lost. The safety net was gone. The wealthy fiancé was gone. The family bailout she always relied upon had vanished. She was legally compelled to hand over the only remaining symbols of her success, walking away from the entire endeavor with nothing but a ruined reputation and a crushing mountain of uncollectible debt. The cold corporate logic of the American billing system acted as the ultimate enforcer. It delivered an inescapable punishment that no amount of social maneuvering could bypass. 6 months passed. The humid Kansas summer faded into a bitter gray winter. The holiday shopping season descended on a sprawling outdoor strip mall in Overland Park. The wind whipped across the expansive asphalt parking lot. Madison stood behind the cash register of a mid-tier home goods store. She wore a standard-issue red polo shirt and a generic beige lanyard bearing her first name. Her hands moved with a dull mechanical rhythm. She scanned barcode after barcode. She folded cheap fleece blankets and stacked discount ceramic mugs into paper shopping bags. Her feet ached inside her sensible black sneakers. There were no designer silk dresses here. There were no champagne flutes or high-end cosmetic routines. There was only the harsh fluorescent lighting and the endless drone of holiday music looping through the overhead speakers. Friday was payday. In the past, a paycheck meant an excuse to browse the luxury boutiques downtown. Today, the digital deposit notification brought only a profound sense of dread. Madison checked her bank application during her mandated 15-minute break. She sat on a folding metal chair in the cramped employee break room. She stared at the screen. The gross pay listed a modest sum. The net pay reflected a brutal reality. A dedicated line item sat near the bottom of her electronic pay stub. It read, garnishment order. The Chicago-based collections agency had not stopped at ruining her credit score. They utilized the legal system. They obtained a formal court judgment for the $35,000 debt resulting from the breached venue contract. The judge authorized a maximum wage garnishment. Every 2 weeks, a significant percentage of her earnings vanished before the money ever reached her checking account. The corporate machinery slowly and methodically extracted its due. She possessed barely enough residual income to cover her basic car insurance and her cellular plan. She could not afford rent anywhere in the city. The luxury sedan was gone, returned to the dealership, after Kyle severed the lease agreement. She now drove a 15-year-old compact car with a failing heater. When her long retail shift ended, she drove back to Olathe. She bypassed the warm upper levels of her mother's colonial house and descended the wooden stairs into the unfinished basement. She slept on a twin mattress resting on the concrete floor. The cold seeped up through the foundation. It was a freezing physical reminder of the trap she built for herself. Brenda was experiencing her own distinct version of purgatory. The social fallout from the rehearsal dinner implosion had spread through their affluent community with the speed of a wildfire. Richard Sterling held immense influence in Kansas City. He did not keep the fraud a secret. He ensured his peers knew exactly why his son walked away from the altar. The country club invitations vanished. The charity gala committees politely removed Brenda's name from their planning rosters. When Brenda visited her preferred upscale grocery store, she noticed her former friends turning down different aisles to avoid eye contact. The curated facade she spent decades maintaining shattered irreparably. She was no longer the respected matriarch of a successful rising family. She was the mother of a known financial predator. The isolation felt suffocating. She spent her days sitting in her pristine living room, staring at the manicured front lawn. She listened to the muffled footsteps of her ruined daughter pacing in the basement below. The silence in the house was a heavy, punishing weight. There was no one left to charm. There was no one left to manipulate. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, a white delivery van pulled into Brenda's driveway. A courier stepped out wearing a dark uniform. He walked up the concrete path holding a thick manila folder. He rang the doorbell. Brenda opened the door. She wore a faded robe. She signed the electronic clipboard without asking questions. The courier handed her the heavy package and walked away. Brenda closed the door. She carried the envelope to her granite kitchen island. She pulled the tear strip. A thick stack of printed spreadsheet pages slid out onto the stone surface. A single sheet of heavy stock paper rested on top. She read the bold black letters printed across the center of the page. Final severance. Brenda turned to the spreadsheets. They contained a meticulous forensic accounting of the past 10 years. Every column documented a specific financial rescue. The early withdrawal penalty on my retirement account, the overdue property taxes, Madison's emergency rent checks, the luxury car deductibles, the utility bills. The right column tallied the exact dollar amounts. The bottom line displayed a staggering total exceeding $40,000. It was a stark, undeniable ledger of my subjugation. It was the price I paid to keep the peace. I had not sent the document to demand repayment. We both knew the money was gone. I sent the ledger to establish a permanent boundary. It was a tangible receipt of my liberation. Brenda traced the numbers with a trembling finger. She realized the Bank of Jonah was permanently closed. She stared at the paper as the bitter truth settled into her reality. She traded a dependable daughter for a social climbing fantasy, and she ended up with nothing. 30 miles away in Leawood, the sun began to set behind a line of mature oak trees. The winter air was crisp, but a cluster of tall propane heaters kept the backyard warm and inviting. There was no grand ballroom, there were no emerald orchids, there were no $50,000 catering minimums. Fixed strands of warm yellow string lights crisscrossed the patio. A local chef operated a portable wood-fired oven near the garden, serving artisanal pizzas topped with prosciutto and fig jam. A small acoustic jazz trio played softly in the corner. The atmosphere smelled of wood smoke and melted cheese and authentic joy. Exactly 20 people stood on the wooden deck. Liam and I kept the guest list restricted to the people who truly mattered. His parents flew in from Boston. His sister Maya traveled from Chicago. A handful of our closest friends filled the remaining space. We did not invite extended relatives out of obligation. We did not curate the event for social approval. We curated it for peace. I wore a simple, elegant white dress I purchased off the rack. Liam wore a dark, tailored suit. We stood near a stone fire pit, holding hands. The flames cast a warm, flickering glow across his face. He looked at me with an expression of profound, steady love. We exchanged our vows without a microphone. We spoke our promises quietly, focusing only on the words and the meaning behind them. The ceremony lasted 10 minutes. It was honest and real. After we sealed the vows with a kiss, the small crowd clapped and cheered. Maya handed me a glass of champagne. Liam's father offered a heartfelt toast that did not involve canceled checks or corporate attorneys. The evening transitioned into a relaxed, intimate celebration. People laughed loudly. They ate good food. They celebrated our union without any underlying tension or hidden agendas. I walked inside the house for a moment to refill my water glass. The kitchen was warm and quiet. The counters were clear except for a few empty wine bottles waiting for the recycling bin. My phone rested on the corner of the kitchen island. I walked over and looked at the dark screen. The device was entirely silent. There were no frantic missed calls. There were no toxic group chats vibrating with passive threats. There were no demands for emergency funds. The 15 layers of conflict that defined the past year had burned away like dry brush in a wildfire, leaving behind a clear, fertile ground. I picked up the phone and slipped it into the pocket of my dress. I did not need to check my messages. I did not need to monitor the mood of my extended family. I was no longer a supporting character in a drama orchestrated by my mother. I was no longer the financial safety net for a sister who despised me. I looked out the kitchen window. I watched my husband laughing with his friends under the canopy of string lights. The path to this moment was brutal and exhausting. It required a cold operational detachment I never knew I possessed. But standing in the quiet sanctuary of my own home, I knew the cost was entirely justified. The American commercial system relies on contracts. People sign agreements, trading their current capital for future promises. For decades, I allowed my family to dictate the terms of my life. I allowed them to draft the rules and collect the dividends. When Madison stole the venue she thought she was securing her future, she failed to realize she was handing me the pen. I used that pen to rewrite the entire operating agreement. I transferred the liability. I closed the accounts. I walked away from the bad investments. I turned away from the window and walked back out onto the patio. The crisp winter air felt incredibly refreshing. Liam caught my eye from across the fire pit. He smiled, raising his glass toward me. I raised my own glass in return. The night stretched ahead, filled with the quiet, enduring strength of a life built on solid ground. True power is not derived from luxury venues or wealthy associations. True power is recognizing a bad deal and having the courage to walk away. True power is owning the contract to your own life. A family operates very much like a financial ledger. Every interaction serves as a deposit or a withdrawal. We frequently focus on the dramatic moments that define a rupture. We look at the canceled weddings, the declined credit cards, and the public humiliations. Yet the foundation of any disaster is usually poured years earlier in the quiet, unseen corners of a childhood home. When we examine the wreckage of Madison's life and the cold detachment Jonah had to construct to survive, we are not simply looking at a sibling rivalry over a Saturday in June. We are witnessing a profound failure in parenting. Raising children requires more than just providing food and shelter. It requires the immense courage to let them feel the heavy weight of their own choices. Brenda believed she was a deeply loving mother. She equated love with relentless protection. Whenever Madison stumbled, Brenda rushed in to smooth the pavement. If Madison overspent her allowance, Brenda simply supplemented her income. When Madison wanted the used car Jonah had worked all summer to buy, Brenda demanded Jonah hand over the keys in the name of family unity. In traditional American culture, we often romanticize the idea of the family unit taking care of its own. We believe a strong household operates as a unified, impenetrable front. There is, however, a very dangerous line between supporting a child and enabling their worst instincts. Brenda crossed that line decades ago and never looked back. By constantly shielding her oldest daughter from the natural consequences of her actions, Brenda did not teach her how to navigate a complex world. She taught her that the rules of society simply did not apply to her. She crippled her daughter's ability to function as an independent, accountable adult. This dynamic created a severe deficit in fairness within the household. True parenting requires a delicate balance of justice and deep emotional awareness. You cannot build one child up by systematically dismantling the other. Jonah was forced into the role of the designated shock absorber. Her academic and professional accomplishments were largely ignored, while her financial resources were routinely harvested to fund Madison's reckless mistakes. Brenda lacked the emotional awareness to see the permanent damage she was inflicting on her younger daughter. She mistook Jonah's quiet, conditioned compliance for endless resilience. She assumed Jonah would simply carry the burden forever because it was easier than confronting Madison. But resilience always has a breaking point. When a parent repeatedly demands that the responsible child sacrifice their peace for the reckless child, they are not teaching loyalty. They are teaching deep resentment. They are planting the toxic seeds of an eventual permanent estrangement. The reality of modern American society is built on ironclad contracts, credit scores, and strict legal accountability. It is a vast commercial system that demands integrity and transparency above all else. You cannot charm a corporate collections agency. You cannot guilt-trip an experienced corporate lawyer negotiating a prenuptial agreement. When Madison stepped out into the real world and attempted to manipulate her wealthy fiancé, she used the only tools she had ever been taught to use: deceit and unearned entitlement. She thought she could hijack a $50,000 venue and force her younger sister to cover the invoice, because that was the exact dynamic Brenda had normalized for 20 years. But the real world does not operate like Brenda's cozy kitchen in Olathe. The real world demands actual payment. When the truth finally surfaced during the rehearsal dinner, Madison was left entirely defenseless. Her mother could not save her from the automated billing gateways or the ruthless, undeniable logic of the American banking system. Guiding children into successful adulthood requires instilling a deep, unwavering respect for honesty. If Madison had been taught the value of earning her own way, she might have planned a modest wedding she could actually afford. She might have married a man who loved her for her authentic self, rather than the wealthy, independent illusion she projected. Instead, she lost everything she valued. She traded her dignity for a fleeting moment of elevated social status. She is now paying for that specific lesson through wage garnishments, a ruined credit profile, and intense public humiliation. It is a harsh penalty, but it is perhaps the only way she will ever learn the true cost of living outside her means. Jonah's journey offers a very different critical perspective on family responsibility. For years, she believed her fundamental duty was to fix the problems her mother and sister routinely created. She thought keeping the peace was the highest possible virtue a daughter could achieve. But true responsibility sometimes means letting the artificial structure collapse, so the people trapped inside are forced to learn how to rebuild. Jonah did not seek revenge. She simply established a legal boundary. She handed the responsibility back to the people who generated the crisis. By doing so, she broke a generational cycle of financial abuse. She protected her own future and built a healthy, authentic partnership with a man who respected her limits. If you are listening to this narrative and recognizing the faint echoes of your own family dynamic, I want you to know that you are not alone. So many of us have been cast in roles we never auditioned for. We have been the fixers, the peacekeepers, the quiet ones who carry the heavy loads while others take the credit. Welcome to the Linda Vengeance channel, where we explore the hidden truths of family dynamics and the transformative power of walking away. I encourage you to subscribe and share your own experiences in the comments section below. We are building a community of people who are learning to rewrite their own contracts and reclaim their independence. Looking back at the empty gravel parking lot of the Grand Prairie estate, we see the ultimate unavoidable consequence of a parenting strategy built entirely on avoidance. A mother sitting in a luxury vehicle watching her daughter's fabricated life turn to ash. It is a profound tragedy that did not have to happen. If Brenda had possessed the courage to say no 20 years ago, Madison might have had a chance to build a real, sustainable life. But the bill always comes due. You can delay the reckoning, you can transfer the debt for a little while, but you can never escape the final audit. Parenting is perhaps the most profound responsibility a person can undertake. It is the painstaking architectural work of building a human being. The materials you choose to use matter immensely. If you build with deception, favoritism, and unearned bailouts, the structure will eventually collapse under its own weight the moment it faces a real storm. If you build with honesty, fairness, and a healthy respect for reality, the structure will stand. The wind will howl, the challenges of modern life will test the walls, but the foundation will hold firm. As the sun sets on the Kansas plains, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of Leawood and the cramped, freezing basement in Olathe, the contrast remains incredibly stark. Two sisters raised in the exact same house, living in entirely different worlds. One found lasting peace by learning how to say no. The other found total ruin by never hearing the word. It makes you wonder about the invisible ledgers kept in your own home. It makes you look at the people sitting across from you at the dinner table and wonder who is actually paying the price for the quiet peace you currently enjoy. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is let their child fail. And sometimes the only way to save yourself is to walk away from your family entirely. The choice is never easy, but the ledger never lies.